This is what happened. Mom was sitting on the bed and held a bundle with a baby in her arms. It was her sister. Mom smiled. Her face looked very happy. She uttered the name of the waist. That was the name of the eldest daughter. And then she said that her little sister has in her arms. She was called Loina. The baby slept wrapped in a pink bedspread. The waist turned away from her mother and buried her father's shoulder. He was extremely surprised and perplexed, asked what happened. The waist did not want to see the sister? She was sorted out by annoyance from the fact that she was stillborn. Loina Remedio was the main character, and now the waist threw a hare whom she held in her hands on the floor and whimpered. She wrapped her hands on her father's neck even stronger, and her sobs became louder. Father gently stroked her back, trying to calm the baby. He looked at his wife as if asking what to do. But then he decided that the waist was simply jealous. He continued to stroke his daughter, and gently calling her by name tried to reassure. He asked that the girl was upset that her mother was holding a baby in her arms, her sister. She opened her eyes when she heard her father asked her that she wanted to get all the attention of her mother alone. This assumption surprised her. And then she began to break out of his arms. She was offended that her father thought that she was some kind of child who would cry with envy of her younger sister. She wanted to scream that he was an idiot. He tried to distract his daughter, and he asked her to look at him. Tears still flowed from the girl's eyes, but she obediently looked at her father. He made a funny face in the hope that his daughter is a little cheer. But she again tried to push him away, crying even more and saying that he was terrible and she wants him to leave here. The girl waved her hands and impacts on his head. Her mother burst out laughing from such behavior of her daughter, and then gently calling her Tilly asked her to come closer. Her mother was a beauty and her name was Roxanne Enfield. She, like Tilly and a newborn baby, had a golden hair. The girl was distracted and switched her attention to her mother, for which her father, Julian Remitio, was grateful to his wife. He put the waist on the bed near Roxanne and looking at his wife with tenderness, also crouched nearby. This couple was characters from the novel and the parents of Loina, the main character. 4 years ago, she fell into this world. After at one moment she was in front of her, rushing at her entire speed. She was a young girl, and the next moment she woke up with a little baby. She remembered her parents bowed over her, Roxanne and Julian. He said that the baby is so small. And Roxanne reassured him so that he would not cry and said that he was now his father. Mom called Julie's father and said that even Tilly was not crying, and he called her Roxy and asked that it was generally normal, that the child does not cry. For the first time, hearing their waist's names was at a loss. But then it dawned on her that she was born in the world that she created in her novel. According to the plot, 3 families guard the world from evil spirits. Imperial Dynasty Acer, guards. Royal Celus Dynasty, cleaners. And the house of the Duke of Remetio, healers. And children born in 3 families. Loina Remetio, Ryan Celus, and Aegis Acer were the main characters of this story. The main character and the second hero of this novel spent a decent childhood, which was unusual for her characters. But this was only to emphasize the difficulties that were ahead. And now the waist and her father bowed near the baby Loina and looked at her. The waist thought sadly that although this story could lead to a happy ending, this would not reduce the pain and suffering that this small child will have to overcome. She squeezed the sheet with a little hand and remembered that she was very hoping until the last that Roxanne would not give birth to her daughter, and that she will not be called Loina. Mom called her and the girl raised her face. Roxanne asked if she loves her. The girl replied that she loves. Then Roxy asked whether she loves Dad, and again Tilly replied that she loved. And then Roxy said that the fact that Loina was born does not mean that Mom and Dad would love her less. She looked into her daughter's widely open eyes and said that this means that in her life there would be more people whom she could love unconditionally. Roxanne smiled and assured her eldest daughter that she and Dad and Loina will love her the same way. The girl was silent. And my mother asked that she still doesn't like Loin. She invited the eldest daughter to say hello to her, and at that moment the baby opened her eyes. They were such a lilac pink color as that of the waist. The girl looked at her sister in surprise. It seemed she was fascinated by the baby. And then Loina opened her mouth and froze as if she wanted to say hello to everyone. And this delighted Tilly. She smiled. It was great. And when the baby launched saliva and the waist entrusted them to wipe them, she thought that no matter how she denied it, but the baby was those whom Tilly loved. Roxanne and Julian are also the characters that she created with care. The one who should not be born is not Loina, but her sister, who was never part of the original story. That is, she is a waste. Perhaps this is because she is only 4 years, but she felt drowsiness all day. The street was wonderful sunny weather, and she lay in the garden on the grass. The father, who returned home, saw her from afar. He carefully called her, and when he approached, smiling, asked that she fell asleep again. He added that he saw her sleeping in the morning when he left. The girl sat on the grass and, smiling, agreed with him. She thought that only noon. Why did my father return home so early? He asked what about playing with him, and he offered the tea ceremony. When they were sitting in the house at the table, Tilly, holding their hair, asked why he returned so early. Julian replied that he could not leave her to miss her alone. She pronounced that he would be fired at such a pace, and this made fun of Julian. The man laughed and said that he could not wish anything more. The girl yawned and thought that she herself brought it to herself, making him a character who wanted to leave the post of prime minister. He constantly walks the work, interrupting her dreek. But his father smiled and said that His Imperial Majesty allowed him to leave early today, so everything is in order. He added that he had a scene so that the emperor agreed to let him go. The waist presented how the father was lying on the floor and hysterically demands that he be released. She turned away and wanted to leave, but he said that she misunderstood him. And then he suddenly asked that she, his dear Tilly, would she always live with her father? The girl looked at her father. The word was imprinted in her mind forever. The picture was resurrected in memory. Everything is sprayed with blood and nearby the wheel from the car. She remembered the last moment when her past life broke off. The evening has come. Lights lit up on the street. The waist lay in her bed, and her mother was lying near her talking with her daughter before bedtime. They chatted, and then Tilly said that Dad sometimes gets her, but she still considers him sweet. Roxanne smiled and noticed that Dad was really cute sometimes. But Tilly suddenly said that today he told her something strange. Roxanne showed interest in her words. The girl looked at her mother seriously and said that Dad asked if she would always live with him. Roxy asked what she answered him. Sadness splashed in her green eyes. For some reason, in Tilly's thoughts, the thought flashed that something should happen. But she yawned and said that she would always live with Nonsense and Dad and Loy. Mom hugged her and pressed her to her. A smile lit up her face, and she said that sometimes it seems to her that Tilly knew what others want to hear, and the waist looked at her mother and thought that she was an adult inside. But the girl was wondering why Dad asked her such a question. Then Roxanne told her that the prince from the neighboring kingdom was forced to live separately from the king for a long time, and she thinks that this made her dad think about her. Tilly again remembered the plot that 3 families guard this world from evil spirits. Imperial dynasty, guards, royal dynasty, cleaners, the house of the Duke of Remetio, healing. The heads of 3 families had special abilities, but they were destined to sacrifice their lives for the good of the world, so that the bowl of justice holds balance, and someone from the lower class in the family often owned power. However, the current emperor, Asser, was an exception, because he was able to seize power through the bloody revolution with Julian and Roxanne. Unlike the empire that took a good turn, the kingdom of Celus remains the same. All power holds the stepmother Ryan and the king, more like her puppy. Ryan, who does not have a mother, is tormented by his stepmother, who is ready for anything to make her son a hard prince. Around this time, the villain and the protagonist of this novel, Ryan Celus, arrives in the empire. To protect his young son, the disenfranchised king had no choice but to send Ryan to the empire, using his studies as an excuse. And so Ryan and Aes grew together, forming a strong connection. Although they spent about a year together, it was the only time in his terrible childhood when Ryan was truly happy. The Duke of Remetio sat in his office and thought that Ryan is the same age Tilly. The news that the king had to give such a small child abroad tormented him. He was perplexed that was everything so bad in the kingdom, and what could go wrong? Tilly burst into his office. She, as always, held her hair in her hands. The girl greeted her father. Julian was crazy about the eldest daughter. He did not go into her souls, so as soon as he saw her, broke into a smile and asked that she had come to visit Daddy. The girl nodded in the affirmative and invited him to play. It seemed to be his biggest dream to play with Tilly. His cheeks were covered with a blush, and he fervently asked what she would like to play. The waist grabbed the hair by the ears and blurted out that she captured his rabbit prisoner. Therefore, it is better for him to obey her if he wants to release the hostage. Julian's eyes widened. He portrayed a chilling soul, and he said in a trembling voice that no, but not that. He fell to the floor and quoted that his poor rabbit, and then he asked, bewildered, what should he do? The girl briefly said that he had to run. But Julian did not understand and therefore asked what she said. The girl explained that at first a warm up, and then he should run around the estate. But his father was not aware. He said again that he had a question. Here she said, but the waist interrupted him and demanded that he call her the Queen of Demons. Julian agreed and asked the question about who this rabbit is. Then the waist answered him that he was a prince from the neighboring kingdom. Julian again incomprehensibly asked why he should save the printer rabbit from the neighboring kingdom. She turned away and stated that if he saves the prince, she would receive the kingdom. Julian stubbornly said to the Queen of Demons that he did not want to receive the kingdom. But the girl said that then he would give it to the prince. There is nothing wrong with making friends with the king of the neighboring kingdom. He looked at his daughter, his gaze was focused and serious. And the waist laughed and said that if he wants to save his friend, she would allow him to run a circle in the garden and not on the estate. But Julian said in dismay that it seems he really had to run a circle. Together they went outside, and the waist ordered that now it was time to run. And he obediently said that his lady was listening. The imperial family, mother and son, had breakfast in the living room. The woman looked absolutely happy. Looking at her son, she thought that he was really just an innocent, angelic child at such moments as now, but she gently uttered his name, Aegis, and the boy immediately raised his eyes to her. She told him that he would soon meet a new friend. The boy was interested in this. He asked what kind he was from. For a while, a woman thought about the fact that he was often visited by not children's thoughts, like this. Then she explained to her son that his new friend was the daughter of the Duke of Remedio, the lovely young lady who is a year younger than the Aegis. He again asked what Mom was talking about, Tilly? A joyful smile appeared on his face. The Empress was surprised that he knew the girl. The boy, continuing to rejoice, said that at their last meeting, his father told him that she would be his bride. At the same time, the Duke Julian with his wife Roxana and his daughter dinner in a narrow family circle with his wife Roxanu. Duke Julian fed his adored daughter from a spoon. He now and then asked her to open her mouth to put another piece of food. He smiled, and calling her Rode, he asked her would not want to visit the imperial palace with Mom and Dad. But the girl with a packed food with her mouth replied that no. The waist suddenly thought about what was her parents suddenly decided. She watched them and noticed how her father was nervous, and her mother looked at him inquiringly. They thought that she was a baby and did not understand anything, and they themselves discussed her future. Roxanne, addressing her father, said that the engagement with the imperial house was not even confirmed. She smiled at her husband and added that his imperial majesty has so far what he said it was in passing, so do not worry so much, and he agreed with her. The waist looked at them in all eyes, intensively chewing food. She did not understand what engagement was in question. Where did the wedding between the Dukes of Remedio and the imperial family suddenly come from? This was not in the original plot. In the original novel, Loina was the only heiress of the Duchy of Remedio. But now there are two heiresses, including the waist. So even if one of them marries a member of the imperial family, there will be no problems with succession. But Prince Aegis is the second main character. The waist thought with horror that Aegis since childhood was in love with Loina. Therefore, if the waist is engaged to the Aegis, perhaps in the future a serious conflict will arise in her family. She so plunged into her thoughts that she did not hear her name at all. Tilly suddenly realized that a trip to the imperial palace is not just a walk. Loina will become the heiress of the Duke, as soon as her special ability manifests itself in the future. Then such a noble daughter, like a waist, without special abilities, is ideal as the bride of the imperial prince. She closed her eyes. Her lips trembled slightly, and her hands trembled noticeably. She did not want to be an empress. High position, but too many responsibilities. All that she wanted to get a decent amount of the inheritance and live a happy, idle life. In addition, the engagement with a 5-year-old child seemed to her some kind of farce, not the present. In addition, she cannot allow a change in the plot from the original. Mom once again called her, seeing that something was happening with her daughter. She tried to attract her attention, but the waist was still silent. Then the girl asked in confusion that she was obliged to go to the imperial palace. Parents unanimously assured her that she was not obliged to do this if she did not want to. In no case did they force her. They just wanted to introduce her to a new friend in the palace, that's all. Tilly sighed and said that she was okay. She agreed. But she warned that this was the last time. Such behavior of the baby caused tenderness among parents, and they both began to smile from her not children's speeches. And the waist, meanwhile, continued to think about this situation. She thought Aegis still fall in love with Lena. She decided to take the opportunity to make him hate her. Parents will not make them play a wedding against their will. She decided to make him never want to see her again. A few days later, in the imperial palace, the waist in an elegant dress appeared before the imperial family. She made a curtsy and said that she was glad to meet, introducing herself as a waist from the house of the Duke of Remetio. The Empress was amazed at her manners. She thought, what a miracle! Such a cute girl! The Empress held out her hand to her to welcome her, but the waist was frightened and began to call her mother. Then the Empress smiled and began to apologize to the baby for her unrestrained behavior. She said with particular enthusiasm that she was just so small and beautiful, sweet, just lovely, that the Empress could not do anything with herself. The waist looked at her and thought that yes, she was sweet. She was a little used to the Empress, and when she proposed sitting down, she happily agreed to call the Empress Her Highness. They were located 5 of the tables in the garden. Near the Empress, her son Aegis was sitting, and the waist sat surrounded by her parents. The baby opened her mouth and threw strawberry berries into it, and this caused a new surge of tenderness from the Empress and Juliana Remezio. They sat rounding their eyes. Her father, looking at her daughter, asked that she liked strawberries, and she frankly replied that she was going to eat his strawberries. At that moment, Prince Aegis brought her on a fork and sang his strawberries that she could eat her. The waist looked at him. Surprise appeared in her eyes. Looking at the boy, she thought that could someone's eyes be so blue? She thought he looked like a doll. She thanked him, and she thought that this doll of the baby would later turn into a 2-meter handsome man. She thought that she would not believe it. The boy blushed slightly from her gaze, and the Empress was watching her son turn to the parents of the waist. She said that she had heard the Emperor last time mention the engagement with their daughter, and at the same time, bowing her head, she asked for forgiveness, saying that she said that it would be good if the children had become friends. But she did not assume that Emperor Pelus would offer an engagement. She had already talked with him about this, and therefore now asked for their good understanding. Julian smiled and said that the Empress had nothing to apologize for. They also did not assume that Peleus was seriously treated this idea. He added that it is too early to talk about such things. At the moment, he hoped that their children could become good friends. Tilly's parents smiled sweetly, and Tilly herself, looking at her father, thought that it was to keep it up. Dad, polite, but clearly and unequivocally expressed his position. The Empress exhaled with relief, and the little Aegis did not understand why she was so nervous. And then he suddenly asked that the waist and he would not get used? The Duke of Remethio stared at Aegis, and his gaze was confused. Did he think that the boy had already thought about the wedding? And he said that one day he would definitely marry the one whom he would really love. The boy confusedly replied that Dad told him that for their imperial family it would be an ideal decision to unite their family with the Dukes of Remetio. The waist, in turn, looking at the boy, thought that this was not what the child should worry about. He had such adult thoughts. Aegis's mother looked at him and told the boy that the Duke of Remetio is right and he should marry who would love. But the boy doubted. Therefore, the Empress gently said that he could miss the opportunity to meet the love of her life if she cares too much about political issues. But it was not so easy to convince him, and he seriously asked his mother that he could marry the waist if he loves her. The Empress smiled and replied that she was not quite. Only when Lady Talia will love him, then they will be able to play a wedding. Aegis turned his gaze to the waist. His face became punsoff with embarrassment, but he clearly wanted to admit her feelings. But she warned his message mentioned that he was not in her taste. Such a statement was the height of insurance, and put Julian and Roxanne in an uncomfortable position. And the waist, meanwhile, continued, saying that she would never go for ice. The boy did not expect this and could not understand how this could be. He confusedly said that he had even given her his strawberries. And is she really not even after that? The waist still looked at him with a gloomy look and thought that it was a proposal in the form of strawberries. And then she even asked that he wants her to spit it out. She also wanted to add that he was dear, does not mean that everyone would lie at his feet. But Roxanne closed her mouth in time with her hand. It was already too much. Roxy smiled sweetly, apologizing to the Empress and her son, and said that Tilly was behaving like Julie and called her dad's daughter. She told her daughter that you can't talk like that with friends. But the girl was clearly unhappy, and although her mouth was closed, she mumbled something displeasedly, making it clear that he was not her friend. Roxy knew her daughter, and realized that she had to talk with Tilly and therefore asked them to forgive, saying that they had to go away for a short while. The Empress did not detain them, saying that everything was in order. When Roxy and the Waist went out into the garden, the girl was angrily walked in front, and Roxy thought that why Tilly did not like spending time with peers. She only loves to play the queen of demons. She called her daughter, and when she turned to her Neof and said that she would never force her to marry someone if she did not want, even if we are talking about the Imperial Prince. The girl shook her head in displeasure and said that she knew. Roxy carefully looked at her and again asked that then why she was behaving so rudely. His Imperial Highness simply wants to make friends with her, that's all. But Tilly said that he was somehow strange and she should not go to the palace. The Waist thought that the Imperial Prince differs from other children. People treat him not as a child, but only as an Imperial Prince. He can have many friends, but none of them will be real. Roxy said that therefore they wanted to introduce them to her Imperial Highness and Dad, because none of them have real friends. Tilly sighed and wanted to say that she knew. She knew that Aegis had no friends until meeting with Ryan, and that he stopped trying to get the heart of Loina and even put his life on the Cora for Ryan. And all because he was the only friend of Aegis in the whole world. The Waist looked at her mother and asked that they thought that the children would be friends because they were from 3 families with special abilities, or because they believed that they should become friends. Her questions were confused by the Roxy. She looked at her daughter and thought about what she was talking like an adult. Tilly smiled and said that she was not some kind of illiterate small child, but the Duchess looked at her daughter and thought that again she was looking at this strange look, which she noticed more than once. Tilly turned away and Roxy asked her, "What does she mean she does not want to be friends with the Imperial Prince?" And the girl replied that the lack of friends would not make her lonely. The girl sadly thought that it doesn't matter how many good friends she could have. They will never become real to her. She is in this world. Roxy was waiting for her answer, and the girl did not want to upset her mother. Therefore she smiled and said that if Aegis is lonely, then she could become his friend. When he and his mother returned to the others, Aegis held a whole plate of strawberries in front of him. He asked for forgiveness and seemed sad and confused. The strawberries were for her, for Tilly, and the girl asked why he was asking for forgiveness. The boy replied that he asked her to marry him because he shared strawberries with her. He added that even if she does not want to get married with him, can they be friends? Tilly joyfully smiled, without saying anything, and she thought that now he was just super cute. Then she took one berry from the bowl that he held and asked him to say, A. Aegis was surprised, but he did as she asks. Tilly put him strawberries in her mouth and smiled. When Aegis chewed, he asked that if she did not mind could call her Tilly. The girl seemed to be thinking and then said that then she would call him Ice. Her answer was delighted with him. He said that of course she could call him like that. Tilly also smiled sweetly, and adults behind her were filled with tenderness from how the children got along with each other. But Tilly, although she smiled, actually thought that she just wanted to go home. She from time to time began to come to the prince in the palace. He read her fairy tales about Cinderella, about how the fairy gave her crystal shoes, and Tilly was exhausted from boredom. The girl thought that who made the prince so boring? And then she fell to the floor from hopelessness and realizing that it was she who invented him. They have been friends for 2 months. And all they do is eat snacks, walk, read fairy tales, and sew in a circle endlessly. The prince excitedly asked that she was bored, but Tilly replied that she was not and asked him to continue. But this time, Ias asked that she could already read on her own. Tilly said no. Ias said that last time she helped him read a word that he did not know how to read, but she still insisted that she did not remember this, and she herself thought that he still noticed. Aegis doubted her words, but still continued to read how Cinderella in glass shoes danced with the prince. And Tilly thought that although she was the author of this novel, she never really thought what fairy tales exist in this world, so it seems they were replaced by those that she knew. For example, Cinderella. She heard the prince said that she still wanted to dance with Tilly. She looked at him, and a blush appeared on his cheeks. She asked that she was not heard and he wants to dance. The prince was shy, and hesitation said that he recently began to go to dance lessons, and his teacher said that he was doing well. He got up and Tilly rose too, but she said that she could not dance. Ias was inspired and asked her to let her teach her. The guy was so glad that she agreed that he said that he would ask to cook everything necessary, spat off away. The Waist remained herself. She looked at the book that Agis abandoned and thought that he probably specifically chose a fairy tale about Cinderella in order to dance with her. It seemed to her so cute. She thought that she herself mastered all types of dance movements when in high school a fan of crore idols. She tried to remember what movements were. Tilly thought that dancing with a child Ice would be easier for her. But then doubt still defeated her. She thought that it was a long time. I remembered how I tried and disgraced. It was her past life. Teenage guys laughed at her. It was unpleasant. When Ice rushed back and said that everything was ready to doubt it, but still agreed. But her surprise knew no bounds when they went out into the garden, and she saw what was happening there. The piano stood in the garden, and the pianist played an unpretentious melody, and next to him stood the artist ready to capture Tilly with an aegis on canvas. Tilly with depressedly asked that all this is, and she added that she thought they would dance, but Aegis assured her which was so. She asked displeasedly that then it was all that. Ice hesitated a little and replied that he had asked his teacher to cook the piano. And my mother said that she wanted to see how they dance. The girl looked to the side where the artist stood and saw the Empress sitting on a chair. And I thought that she even paid the artist? The Empress saw Tilly's surprise and therefore came up to say hello to her, and at the same time asked that she surprised her. The girl replied no, just... The Empress smiled again and explained that the fact was that she told her parents that she was coming to watch as children dance and they were invited and considered it dishonest. The waste only thought that she was what it was, and so she decided to capture their duels in the dance on canvas, unless they are opposed. Tilly was silent, and Aegis was afraid to say anything, but he really wanted her to agree. In the end, she thought who was she to be ashamed? She herself wrote her characters like that, and she agreed, to the incredible joy of everyone. The waste looked at Aegis and only now noticed his outfit. The white suit was embroidered with a gold thread. He held out her hand, inviting her to the dance, but she stood as if dug. His suit was exactly the same to match her dress. Only now she remembered how the maid got her today's dress and joyfully reported that it was completely new. She asked if she liked Tilly. The girl then replied that she liked it. It was so puppet and sweet. She smiled and extended her hand to Aegis, thinking that they had steam rooms and they all participated in this. But for some reason she was not angry, but rather was in anticipation of this. The music sounded and the children dizzy in the dance. Aegis looked at the waist with a concentrated gaze, and she was at him. The Empress, in turn, admired them. The artist tried not to miss the details. At some point, the waist suddenly stepped on the leg. She felt uneasy from this miss. The girl looked at the prince, but he smiled at that time, as if he were making it clear that nothing terrible had happened. But she still thought that she was an idiot, and it made her upset. When she came to Prince Aegis the next time, they again read fairy tales. Aegis watched the Tilly sneak. She sat silently as always, hugging her hair. Her gaze was sad, and it seemed that she was focused on something. He suddenly thought that Tilly liked him. He noticed for a long time that at times she looks upset, just like now. At that moment, the waist looked at him as if feeling his gaze, and Aegis invited her to take a walk in the garden. But the girl said that she didn't really want to walk. Then Aegis did not lose hope and said that he would roll her on his back, and then the girl agreed. They went outside. The waist climbed onto his back and embraced him with his hands by the neck, and he, with a satisfied look, carried her along the path. They approached the gallery, and he asked about her younger sister. The waist asked what he was talking about, Loina. The prince asked how she looks. They were surrounded by an arch of red roses, and the waist told Isis that her sister had blonde hair and purple eyes just like her. The prince said that she probably looks very sweet time like Tilly, but she said that she thinks that Loina is more like her mother. The boy asked what she looks like Tilly, and the girl assured him that Loina looked like her. Aegis admitted that he used to want him to have a younger brother or sister, and Tilly asked in surprise what he wanted before, but now, and he replied that he now has her. The girl said that she was not his younger sister, but he objected that however she was younger. The waist stubbornly objected that she would also hit her for 5 years soon, but Aegis said that he was soon 6. She didn't like it, so when he shifted her, and therefore pressed his neck and asked what he said. Aegis lost his balance and they fell on the grass. The boy looked at Tilly and asked if everything was in order with her. Tilly looked at his face. He smiled, and she was terribly annoyed. And so she asked displeasedly that he smiles so stupidly because she looks like his younger sister. He nodded that it was like that. Tilly was completely angry and said that he would choose some other friend and play with him like a younger brother. Aegis said that he said that it was like that, and he did not mean that he would really like her to be his sister. He added that he likes her as it is, not like other friends. And then he added confused that he was smiling only in front of her, that is, in front of other friends. He was completely at a loss and said that he wanted to say that, But Tilly asked him that he only likes her, and he said yes. The girl asked why. Then Aegis said that she was the same as he. Remedio. He smiled, and Tilly asked again that it was because they are together, the children of 3 families in which people have hopes. He nodded. Then Tilly asked why he had fun with other friends. The boy honestly replied that he was obliged to do this. She asked what to go to school, right? Aegis nodded again. Tilly sighed. She seemed to be crying now. Aegis held out his hand to her. The boy suddenly asked that she hates him. Tilly closed her eyes and said that no. Ais was named after Aegita, the most popular armor in Greek mythology. He was a character who, with all his heart, wants to become a knight to protect people and the one he loves. He is kind, polite, and honest. This character is mainly associated with its innate qualities, but also because of the environment in which it has grown. The perfect prince, who could be seen in fairy tales. Tilly thought that it was impossible to say that it was bad, but nevertheless, his character frustrated her. She looked at him with sad eyes and thought that he was just a small child. She did not know if she did the right thing forcing him to sacrifice everyone only for the sake of the original plot. Was it worth it that it was normal? To be a little selfish? Ais asked that if she was sad not because of hatred for him, then what's the reason? But she replied that precisely because she did not hatch him. She did not know what to do with him. Her answer was even more confused. He was silent. And Tilly turned and went away, saying that he was still too small to understand. When she got into the carriage, she thought that she was very worried about a small child. Julian Remedio, who was sitting opposite her, heard her sigh and looked at her daughter. Did he think something happened? Father asked that they did something special today. The girl told him that Aegis plunged her on her back. Julian smiled and, asking that she likes that Aegis was like a younger brother, thought that everything was in order. But Tilly suddenly asked an angry tone why his father called him an older brother, and he replied that the Aegis is a few months older than her. The girl answered displeasedly that a couple of months mean nothing. Julian laughed, and she asked why he laughs. And then the Duke of Remedio said that he and Aegis's father also often argued about who is older. Tilly was interested in who is older. The Duke replied that of course he is. The girl asked with interest that he was born before His Highness. He proudly replied that for a month. But Tilly remained serious. Julian looked at her and asked that she did not like Ais. She honestly replied that she did not like and turned away to the window. Father carefully asked if there is any reason. Tilly said that he was dear. Her answer again forced the Duke to laugh, and he said that she was often just like a mother. And he added that they are both very straightforward. Countries, he noticed that the portrait with her and the AIs was already finished. Tilly did not attach much importance to this. Unlike the Duke, he sang with a nightingale about what Tilly and her dress. Such little cute fingers are just a charm, not to mention this delicate smile on the face, and her brilliant hair and her royal purple, like lavender, her eyes, shiny like a crystal. They can see a whole world in them. The flow of his speeches did not stop. Tilly closed her ears with her hands, and he continued to say that her image did not even convey her real. Then he said that he and His Imperial Majesty argued which of them two is nicer, and he insisted that the dispute could not be allowed until he himself sees. She was so sweet. In the end, Julian asked that it was just funny, as she thinks. He added that be that as it may, Peleus was not going to give up, so they decided to arrange a family assembly this week. And this shocked the waist. Emperor Peleus stood in front of the picture on which Tilly and Ais were depicted. He examined the children, and not turning to his wife, who was settled by Aegisa, asked what she was thinking about Julian's daughter. Lottie said that she was an angel. The emperor looked at his wife and admitted that, to be honest, he did not expect much from her. The empress straightened her son's blanket and asked what, however, Peleus offered the engagement, but he replied that it was only a fleeting thought. Lottie thought that it seemed to her that her son was the most mature child in the world. She heard people admired his upbringing at such a young age. Everyone noticed that he was not mature over the years, and she could not but amuse that he was a really perfect imperial prince. She was satisfied. Then there was such a good ball. At least she thought so. In the evening, she asked her son, what friend did he like the most? The boy replied that he liked Count Troville the most. She was surprised by the answer of Aegis because Count Troville was a peer of the emperor. And the boy, as if nothing had happened, said that his father seems to maintain close relations with the count, and so he thought that it would be good to maintain this connection on a long-term basis. The empress was puzzled by the fact that he at such a young age thinks about such things. He is only 5 years old. a child whose circumstances remind him that he is the most respected person in the whole empire. She remembered how the emperor said that why not introduce him to the daughter of the Duke of Remetio, and she remembered the baby Tilly. At that moment, when Charlotta first saw the waist, she was sure that it was an angel who descended from the sky to change the Aegis. And when the emperor first saw her, he was no less fascinated. He looked at her with such adoration, and the girl in response wanted to tell him that he could not stop examining her right now. Emperor Pelias, looking at the Duke of Remetio, said that she was very similar to Julian, but at the same time very cute. He called her charming. Julian Remetio, meanwhile, asked why His Highness did not like him. He said that Roxy and Tilly say that he was dear, but the emperor replied that for him, he did not look sweet. The waist watched their skirmish and thought that it was probably not worth making them like that. They make everyone feel shame. She suddenly drew attention to the smell. Julian Remetio drank from his cup and she guessed that it was coffee. The three most important nutrients for Koreans: carbohydrates, alcohol, and caffeine. She remembered these tastes from a past life, and now she incredibly wanted to try them. She turned to her father and began to ask him for coffee. Julian Remetio smiled at his daughter and asked what was interested in. He explained to her that this is called coffee and they like to drink in the south. And the girl asked, could she try? But he said that she was still too small to drink coffee. The girl looked upset. Did she think that he was serious? This is not even alcohol. A sip of coffee will not kill her. She said that you can't even try a sip? Her voice was so cute that it was impossible to refuse. Julian could not resist when his daughter looked at him like that. He tried to resist her request and said that why shouldn't she drink milk instead of coffee? Tilly turned away from her father in displeasure. It seemed more unhappy she was not in the world. But at that moment His Imperial Highness smiled and said that Lady Tilly could make a sip from his cup. Roxy looked seriously and warned warningly that she should not do this. But Pelias jokingly said that this was just a sip. In addition, he can give her an early idea that life is a little bitter. The girl drank from the cup and thought about the emperor's words that life was a little bitter. No, it couldn't be. Life is one continuous grief. She missed it. The emperor looked at her in surprise when she smiled, put the cup on the table. He asked that not bitterly, and the girl smiling replied that she was normal. Julian smiled and said that Tilly was not particularly selective when it came to food. Aegis handed her a donut covered with sweet purple glaze. He was the only one on his plate, and he gave it to her. Tilly took the donut and divided it in half, giving half to Aegis. Children ate a donut, and adults watched them, rejoicing at how the children get along with each other. Then Tilly said that she wanted to go out to play with Ace. The boy was incredibly delighted with this idea, and they, accompanied by the maids, went to the garden to take a walk. Tilly walked ahead and thought that she was leaving because of the stuffy atmosphere, in which everyone treated her as a child. But really nothing can be done about it. Now she looked especially sad. Ice called her, but she did not turn. Just asked what it is. The boy caught up with her. His cheeks were burning and he asked if she wanted coffee. He said that it looked like she loves coffee, so he secretly asked to bring a little. Tilly was surprised and delighted at the same time. She silently looked at Aegis, and he took out a handful of coffee beans from his pocket and stretched out to her to take. Tilly continued to be silent. He was wary and asked that something was wrong. Will she eat coffee? He threw a couple of coffee beans into his mouth and tried to get them out. But then he asked in surprise, what is it? Tilly sighed and asked why he eats them, calling him a fool. Her eyes suddenly widened. She remembered another situation. She shouted to him that she hates him, and everything will tell Mom. She asked what she had done, and he said that she herself wanted to try coffee, and it happened. It was her brother from that other life. He reassured her that everything was in order, everything would be fine. Aegis noticed her condition and frightenedly asked what happened to her. The girl was silent. And then she said in syllables that she wanted to go home. Ias took her hand and said that she could not return right now because they still have a joint dinner. Tilly screamed to leave her. Tears rolled from her eyes, and she stubbornly said that she was going home. Aegis did not know what to do with his girlfriend, had a hysteria. She cried and repeated that she was going home, and he did not understand why her mood changed so sharply. He tried to console her, taking her hand, and she understood that it was too... After all, she died holding her brother's hand. Her brother, who always laughed at her, cried all her eyes. So she really died? Tilly was uneasy from these memories, and she screamed again that she wanted to go home. And then she began to beat Ias with her hair. At that moment, the maid intervened, wanting to stop the fight that her lady started. And the waist could not stop the flow of tears. She sat on the ground and mourned her past life. She was quite sad that she died like that. She did not understand why she was reborn into a character who did not even exist in her novel. Despite the fact that she tried very hard to love this place, no matter how she tried, she cannot get rid of the thought that everything is only the fruit of her work. She began to sob quietly and call her mother. One of the maids immediately ran to the palace for the Duchess, and Tilly caught herself thinking that her head was overwhelmed with thoughts that this was just a dream, and that she will wake up in the hospital when she opens her eyes. And if this is possible, then this is all that she would like, for the last time to see the face of her real mother. Tilly became silent a little, and Aegis continued to sit next to her and encourage, saying that her mother would come soon. He asked what was better for her. The girl said that not really. She thought that she was not very eager, but already completely exhausted. And he carefully wiped his tears on her face. She really got better. She calmed down gradually. Tears stopped running from her eyes. Tilly thought about her useless children's body. Aegis asked why she was so upset. Is it because of coffee? But Tilly suddenly said that because she was not born a cat. He was taken aback by such an answer and again asked that she wants to be a cat? For what? And then she replied that she just had a cat. She would not have to make friends with him. Aegis looked at her in bewilderment. And then he asked, what did he already ask what she hates him? But she replied that she liked him. Then he asked why she said this. Tilly asked what he liked her, or does he think he should like her? He was again surprised by her words. But Tilly continued to ask that he could love her because she is Remetio. But the boy said that everything was not so. Tilly poked a finger at him and asked that he was completely sure of this. The girl said that he was more worried about what he should do, and not what he feels. She said that he said that they were similar. So he is wrong. They are completely different and will never be similar. She added that she just wants to be friends with him because she likes him, but it does not seem to feel the same. She remembered him when he treated her with strawberries, and said that she knew what he was thinking when he smiles and looks at her. Tilly crossed his arms over her chest and stated that if he continues to behave, she would no longer be friends with him. Age was surprised and asked that she would no longer be friends with him. The girl confirmed that she would no longer come to visit him, and in general, he would not call him an eyes either. But the boy reminded her that she said that she liked him. Tilly replied that yes, but she was not going to love him if he does not love her in response. He assured her that he also liked her. But Tilly continued, saying that if someone else had the daughter of the Duke of Remetio, would he adore her just like her, Tilly? Isn't she right? Aegis replied that this was not true, but Tilly still doubtfully asked what was he sure. Then Aias sat down opposite her knees and admitted that he did not know. Now Tilly was surprised, and tears rolled from his eyes and he said what he should do. And now Tilly wiped off his tears and said that instead of thinking about what he should do, let him think about what he wants. The boy said that he should be a good imperial prince. Tilly looked into his eyes and said that he should not become a good prince, but to make people believe that he could become them, because he is a good person. Tilly smiled and said that, to be honest, she was not worried about whether he was good or not. She loves him as he is. He looked at her and was silent, and she thought that he could now think about himself at least a little. Although this is the world of her novel, being born here, he deserves to live as he wants. After all, they do not know how or when their lives come to an end. She wanted him to live without regrets, even if he suddenly ceases to be the second main character and will become a villain, as a character she created in this world. She will always be proud of them no matter what. Perhaps she was born in this world to save someone. Because regardless of whether they are the main characters, secondary characters, or villains, her love extends to all characters the same way. Tilly smiled sweetly. She finally seemed to come to terms with the fact that she would have to live in this world. Tilly told him that if he also loves her, not like an imperial prince, but like a session, then they can become real friends. He looked at her in all eyes, as if for a long time he thought about what she had said, and then he closed his eyes and shook his head. Tilly asked, upset, that he did not want to be friends with her. The boy said at first yes, then no, then he said what he wanted. Tilly could not understand it, so wants or not. She asked him why he turned his head. Aegis said that he did not want to be just a real friend. She asked in surprise who he wants to be then. Aegis jumped up and firmly said that he wanted to marry her. Tilly was upset but did not want to show it. She said that she was not sure about the wedding, but Ais did not understand why. They both love each other. The waist said that people can be loved in different ways. To marry, he must love a person in a special way, but Aegis insisted that he loved her in a special way. Tilly sighed and said that it was clear, and then she thanked him. Aegis asked that they would get used only when she loves him, the way he was her. The girl replied that was true. He took her hands and with the heat said that then he would do everything so that she, too, fell in love with him in a special way. Tilly looked at the prince and thought that he was still the second main character of the novel. For a 5-year-old child, it's pretty bold to say this. She got up and shook her skirt, said that it was good, and added to try. And then she turned and saw behind them the Duchess and maids. They stood and looked at the children. Tilly asked how long Roxanne listened to them. Her mother strictly said that, from the moment the Aegis made an offer. Roxy carefully looked at the children. They both seemed confused. And then she smiled and asked that Tilly relaw. Tilly poked a finger on the ground in the place where coffee beans lay and said that His Imperial Highness told her to eat coffee grains. The boy immediately said that he was to blame. He gave Tilly something inedible and asked for forgiveness. The Duchess was silent, and the servant behind her was nervous from the fact that she was noticed by the children. But at that moment Tilly said that His Imperial Highness hit his rabbit 3 times. This time the Duchess looked angry. She asked her daughter, calling her by name, Talia Remetio, understands what she did wrong? The waist crushed in crushing that she hit His Imperial Highness, although she should not insult people. Roxanne asked why she hit him. The girl said that her mother said that Aegis needed a real friend. He looked at Tilly and she continued to say that she wanted to be his real friend. But Aegis was kind to her only because she is Remetio, and not because of love for her. Roxanne looked at the children with sympathy and was silent, and Tilly said that she decided not to be friends with him and go home. And when he decided to stop him, she freaked out and hit him. The girl closed her eyes and said that she had talked with him and asked Aegis to forgive her. He immediately said that he was forgiving. Roxanne sat down in front of them on her knee and, turning to His Imperial Highness, apologized to him for the behavior of her daughter. But the prince replied that everything was in order. But the Duchess said that she also asked for forgiveness for the pressure that she could exert on his feelings. Aegis was silent, not quite understanding. Then Roxy smiled and said that if he allowed, she wants to say that it doesn't matter what kind of child he is, bad or good, Julie and she loves him with anything, so he does not have to work hard. Tilly looked at her mother displeasedly and thought that it looked like she heard the whole conversation, and Aegis thanked Lady Roxanne for the warm words. She got up and suggested Tilly that, albeit early now, but it is better to return home now. In fact, Tilly was glad that they returned home early. She went to the nursery to her sister and began to play with her. Loina Teru pronounced the sounds of mama. She was an exact small copy of the waist. Tilly said that the baby had already woken up and did not even cry. The child again said the syllables of mama. And then she sat in the crib, and the waist was again surprised that the baby could already sit herself. She remembered that she seemed to her for 6 months. Loina repeated the already familiar syllables again and again, and Tilly asked her that she loves her because she was her older sister. The baby said again, mama. Tilly smiled joyfully, funny from the baby. She is such a cute sister, Loina. Denial, anger, compromise, depression, and acceptance. It seemed to her that now she was at the stage of acceptance. It is difficult for her to continue to pretend that this cannot be, to roll tantrums on this subject. She asked Loina how she thinks her waist here to help anyone. If she can no longer return, she will have to accept the fact that now she should live like a waste. She thought for a while. Her character was not in the novel. She did not know what role she was prepared, but it seemed to be ready to start a new life. Therefore, she decided to live her joyfully, and therefore she smiled at the baby and wished her good morning. Meanwhile, the carriage with Prince Ryan was approaching the lands of the Empire. One of the knights turned to the nanny of the prince, Madame Mathilde, and said that since they should prepare for the arrival of the knights, she should transfer to another carriage. The woman agreed and looked at the prince, whom he examined the surrounding landscapes, called His Highness to approach her. The boy unquestioningly fulfilled the request and went to the nanny. She smiled at him and said that she needed to transfer to another carriage. She asked if he would cope alone. He became anxious. After all, he was traveling to another country, where he had no friends nor acquaintances, and even more than his own people, he was alone, and his heart squeezed a bad foreboding. But he calmly replied that he would cope. He got into the carriage and, pulling his knees, put his hands on them and bowed his head. Loneliness was his usual state. He remembered how his father spoke before leaving him. He said that Ryan would be much better if he leaves the Empire. Now the boy thought it was a lie. Fear fettered his soul. Meanwhile, at the Remedio estate, Roxanne also said goodbye to her daughter. She said that she would return in a maximum of 10 days. But the waist still escorted her a dissatisfied look. The girl said that the problem is not that. She reproached her mother for the fact that they would not say goodbye if Tilly had not gotten up early in the morning. Roxanne was dressed in knightly armor. Apparently it was not just a walk. She smiled sweetly at her daughter and asked for forgiveness for not saying before. Just in recent days, she was really busy with work. Tilly thought that Roxanne seemed to meet Ryan soon. She asked that next time Roxy would warn her at least the day before leaving. The Duchess promised that she would do so. Julian stood and looked at how they said goodbye, and tears came to his eyes. Tilly hugged her mother and kissed her on the cheek, while thinking that she hoped that Roxanne was not very upset. The girl asked her mother to return home in integrity and preservation, which again surprised Roxy. She left the Duke to distract her daughter a little, invited her to take a little walk with him. They went to the theater. On the stage, there was an idea of a knight and a lady. He held a sword in his hands and promised to protect her and asked him to calm down. She stood aside and looked at how Bravo waving her sword as if fighting off enemies. And then he fell to his knees and, calling her his beautiful lady, invited her to go somewhere very far. She approached him and he called her a muse of comedy and poetry. Talia asked if she liked his game. The girl smiled barely noticeably. It was the end of the performance. Julian Remedios smiled and began to clap his hands. The waist sat near him in the bed and blinked his eyes. She remembered that, for sure, the waist was a muse of comedy and light poetry. The name of the Aegis also has roots from ancient Greek mythology. But a monotheistic religion dominated in this world. Where did the muse of comedy and light poetry come from? When they decided to eat and sat down at a table in one restaurant, Tilly asked Julian why was she called that. He answered her, but the girl still asked for what he means he decided to name her in honor of the character from the play. Julian replied that on the day when she and her mother found out that they had Tilly, they went to watch the play. He cut off a piece of meat and asked Tilly to say A to put this piece in her mouth, and he continued to tell that the play was very impressive. There were only 2 characters in it. Therefore, they decided to name her in honor of the protagonist. If she is born a boy, and in honor of the muse, if she is born a girl. Tilly chewed food and thought about what he told her. Muse of comedy. Julian, meanwhile, said that their muse Tilly had a birthday soon. He was happy. A smile illuminated his face. Father asked if there was anything that she would like to receive as a gift. The girl looked at her reflection in the mirror and paused for some time. And then she said that she did not think. But Julian said that she was okay. She could wish anything. Tilly thought about her birthday. Her birthday in a past life fell on Christmas. Her mother said that she was glad because she could give only one gift for both her birthday and Christmas. The girl said that she hoped such a gift on her birthday. She has not yet fully reconciled with this. Meanwhile, in the mountains where the carriage of Prince Ryan stopped, something incomprehensible. Somewhere nearby, black smoke began to rise. The sound was sharp and the carriage shook. The boy fell to the floor and twisted a kalachik. He did not know what was happening there. Only one thought was spinning in his head, that they were attacked. Fear and tears froze in his eyes. He was afraid to move. But still, curiosity prevailed. He looked out the carriage window and saw clubs of black smoke. He thought that, not that. The streaming soul of fear declared his body. He sat and did not move. At that moment, someone's fingers stuck into the gap between the boards of the carriage and doors and tried to open the door. She opened easily, and he saw a knight with long blonde hair. In an instant, he closed his eyes and thought that he would die. But the next moment, a fair-haired woman turned to him and, calling him, "Your Highness," held out his hand and told him to go with her. He looked at her and was in no hurry to go out. He did not know who she was. But the woman still persistently asked him to leave, as if she had driven and tried to reach him. In the end, she pulled out the boy and put it in her saddle, hugging him. And at that moment, his carriage rolled down the slope to the cliff. Ryan was so scared that he clung to the woman who saved him and did not look in the direction where the rumble of the carriage was heard. Roxana also pressed him to her, trying to calm the baby. Someone called to her, calling a grandmaster. Another horseman approached them. He said that she should not expose herself to such a risk. Roxanne was in a hurry, but Ryan pressed him even more tightly to her as a single stronghold of defense. She said that she had nothing else left. The prince was in danger. But the knight did not calm down. He shouted that he said that he himself would follow him. And then Quieter asked what would happen to 3 families if something happens to her, and he asked her not to neglect his status and position. Roxanne pressed the boy to her chest and replied that this is why she did so. Now that she intervened, they will not be able to resist the Empire. At that moment, they ran up to them by the nanny Ryan, Madame Matilda. She said in alarm that thank God the boy is alive. Ryan said in a trembling voice that the knight saved him. Roxy only now felt that he was trembling. The nanny said that Roxy knight from the Empire. The woman lamented that when the bandits attacked them, the horses tied to the prince's carriage were completely brutalized. She was afraid to even imagine what could happen to His Highness if they had not appeared. She began to thank the knights for salvation, and then she promised that she would inform the kingdom about it so that they could pay off the empire they provided for the kindness. Roxy put the boy on the ground, and Madame Matilda said that now she would take care of His Highness. Roxanne said that she completely forgot to introduce herself in all this chaos. Matilda bowed her head and said that she understood. Roxana sat down before His Highness Prince Ryan. He did not know what to expect and was confused, but she smiled so sweetly and amiably, saying that her name was Roxanne Enfield. The boy gathered the remnants of his composure and answered, saying that he was Ryan from the Celus clan. 11 days have passed since Roxana left for service. Tilly was sad. She thought that Julian also leaves early in recent days and works until the very night. The girl hoped that everything was in order. A maid entered her room and interrupted her thoughts. The girl asked what Tilly would like to do today, but instead of an answer, she asked where her rabbit was. When she woke up, she was not on the bed. The maid replied that she went to wash and will soon return perfectly clean. Tilly asked to convey to Rabbit so that she still ate well, because she became not so fluffy. And when she was promised that she would return clean and fluffy as soon as possible, Tilly lay on the sofa, lined with pillows, and said that it was good. The maid asked in a frustration that Tilly was going to sleep again, and she invited her to play, but the girl, without opening her eyes, said that she did not really want. Then the girl said that if Tilly plays with her, then she would bake black bread that Tilly loves so much. The child instantly became interested. Black bread. Inside there was raisins and dried fruits and more nuts, and Tilly really loved it. She jumped out of bed and asked for the maid to do without raisins, only with nuts. The girl promised her that she would do so, but only today. She said that she was fine and then offered to play dolls, saying that she would be a lion. And she offered a nanny to be a deer. The girl asked in surprise that these two are friends. Tilly was surprised, the nanny, that he does not know that the lions eat deer. If the deer wants to survive, then he must hold the lion well, and then the lion will not eat a deer. The nanny stared at Tilly dumbfounded and said that it was clear. And Tilly continued to speak, saying that Leo loves bread. This led the nanny from a stupor, and she was indignant that it was dishonest and offered to play something else. Tilly easily agreed, offering to play pirates. The nanny suggested guess that Tilly would be a pirate, and she was an unhappy victim with bread. Tilly innocently asked what she found out. Then the nanny gave up and said that she would just go and bake her bread. Tilly lay down again and closed her eyes. The girl thought she usually plays along with, but today she's not tuned to the games. Suddenly, a loud cry was heard from behind the wall. Tilly immediately sat on the bed and listened. The crying from the children's room of Loina came to cry. Tilly thought that her sister still was Roxanne's daughter, and of course, she will have distinctive voice and endurance. The girl hurried to the nursery and from the threshold asked the nanny why Luina was crying again. The nanny held the baby in her arms, and she came up with crying. Tilly went closer to them and looked at her sister. The nanny said that the girl was just angry before bedtime, and said that Loina looked at who came to her. She asked the baby if she wants to say hello to her. Loina was quiet, and the nanny was delighted to say that as expected. The baby stops crying as soon as Tilly sees. She also said that she was thinking Loina will soon fall asleep. Tilly asked that the nanny could ask Nana to bring bread here, and she said that Nana is in the kitchen. The nanny Loina did not understand what it was about, but Tilly had already ordered that she would look after Loya, so she should go faster. And she asked her to make sure that Nana did not put the raisins in bread. Meanwhile, she herself climbed into the crib to her sister and mentioned near her. Tilly examined Loina and decided that she looked stupid. So funny. Tilly was watching the sister and did not understand how she fell asleep. When she woke up, the nanny again held Loina in her arms. She asked that Tilly fell asleep again, and she added that she thought she wanted bread. Tilly asked her to be given bread. While she was sleeping, the bread was just baked. Tilly Dally gave this treat, and with great pleasure she took in both hands in a cake and bitten away from one or another. She was incredibly tasty. The nanny looked at Tilly and thought it was so cute. She smiled and said that she had heard that a new friend would remain with them for a short while. The nanny asked that it's not great to make friends with a new friend. Tilly said with a full mouth that she already had a friend. Then the nanny asked what was she about Rabbit, but Tilly said that she was about Aegis. The nanny smiled even harder and said that of course she was talking about the Aegis of the imperial prince. Tilly suddenly asked when her mother would return, and the nanny answered her that while Tilly was dozing, she was told that she would come soon, so that Tilly may not be worried. At that moment the door opened and Tilly with the nanny looked in that direction. Because the other maid entered the room joyfully said that the Duchess was coming. Tilly got out of the bed and that she rushed to meet her mother. The maid only managed to step aside from her road. But when she ran out to the steps of the palace, she immediately saw that Roxanne came not alone. Near her stood a boy and some other lady. Roxanne, as always, smiling, greeted her daughter and asked her to say hello to Prince Ryan from the kingdom of Celus. He was about her age, with black hair and red eyes, and for some reason did not look at her. Ryan was the main character of her novel, and she immediately liked him. They looked at each other and Tilly thought he was doing here. Tilly remembered the words of the nanny of a new friend, and the fact that he would have left for a short while, and realized that she was talking about him. Meanwhile, Roxy said that Prince Ryan came to the Empire for his formation, and so far remains with them. Tilly was surprised that he would remain in the Duke's estate, but said nothing. According to the initial plot, he was supposed to go to the Imperial Palace and make friends with the Aegis. Tilly handed Ryan a bun of baked bread and asked if he wanted to try, but he looked doubtfully. Then Tilly said that her hands were clean. But he still stood and silently looked at Tilly with his whole appearance showing that he did not want to take. His nanny said that His Highness should not abandon such good gestures, and she added that the girl is the daughter of the Duke Remetio. Ryan held out his hand and took the roll, and Tilly looked at Madame Matilda and thought that he was following him by order of the Queen. Ryan looked at Bread with hungry eyes and slowly brought him to his mouth to bite off a piece, as if he was afraid that he would be taken away. Tilly thought again that he was not even fed as it should. Roxy went to Tilly and said that it was so cute to treat the prince from her, but was she going to say hello to His Highness? Then the girl, smiling again, looked at Ryan and said hello. He looked at her sadly and also greeted her, mentioning her. Tilly said that her name was not my lady, and it was confused by the prince. He seemed to be afraid that he had made such a mistake. But Tilly laughed cheerfully and said that her name was the Waist, and allowed her to call her Tilly. But she warned that if he calls her Tilly, then they would become friends. A semblance of joy appeared in the eyes of the boy, and she continued, saying that friends do not have to be so strict with each other. She asked that the Prince wants to be friends with her. The boy completely hung his head, and Tilly had to bow to him to see his face. She asked that maybe he wants to become one of her warriors who serve the Queen of Demons, so to speak, her assistant. She asked in frustration that he was not at all interesting. But the boy, looking at his feet, said that he agreed to anything. He stood in front of them, ate restraining sobs from the hardships of the experienced day, and they looked at him with sympathy. Tilly looked at her mother and for some reason was sure that it was Roxanne's undertaking to bring him here. Then she, as her daughter, should become him a good friend. She held out her hand to Ryan and said that then he was now her warrior. The boy looked doubtfully at his outstretched hand. And Tilly was completely amused and added that she was a generous queen of demons in relation to her assistants, so he may not worry. And for the first time in all the time, Ryan appeared in the eyes of Ryan for something good and bright in his life. He held out his hand towards Tilly's hand and they stuck a handshake. At first these were uncertain touches. But the next second, something warm and kind spilled in the hearts of children through their hands. Tilly seemed completely happy. She smiled at the top of her mouth. And her mood was slowly transmitted to Ryan. Tilly turned to Roxanne and asked her mommy to arrange a picnic in the garden with sandwich and bread that Nunny prepared. And he and Ryan will play for the time being waited for Dad. Roxy, smiling, asked what she was sure. Behind her stood Madame Matilda, and she seemed displeased. Roxanne turned to her and said that since the extension for His Highness and the rest is just preparing, why don't all have a time in the garden for some time? She added that they should all be tired of traveling for 2 whole months. Madame Matilda confusedly said that it would be nice. The Duchess, meanwhile, continued, saying that with regard to their stay in the extension, the butler would be at their service. Tilly, in turn, turned to Mr. Butler. A middle-aged man sat down near her, asking what she needed. The girl rested her hands on her sides with a plan. She whispered in his ear that from now on the prince would become one of the warriors of the Queen of Demons. And she said that she would allow the butler to become him too, so they can do something bad together. The man smiled and said that it would be an honor for him, and Tilly thought that she knew that the butler would quickly think. He is not only a butler of this estate, but also a terrible person who controls the intelligence organization of Julian, so he is quite suitable for the role of one of the four warriors. Tilly returned to Ryan and said that she would introduce him to her younger sister before they go to the picnic. Tilly added that she was such a scarecrow, he would know. Just scream. This time, Roxanne angrily said that she asked Tilly not to call her sister a scary. She understands everything, albeit a baby. But Tilly only laughed and taking Ryan by the hand of commanding him to follow her. Roxy warned her that she would harm her friend if she was so pulling him. But the girl reasonably noticed that he was not a friend, but a subordinate. The Duchess was surprised how she generally knows such a word, but the girl famously dismissed that from her dad. Tilly was in such a hurry to run away that she rebelled and fell. Ryan looked at her in dismay. The girl raised her face. It was a crimson color from what she became ashamed of such clumsiness. The prince came up and taking her hand helped her to rise. Roxanne looked at her daughter with a bewildered road and said that therefore she asked her not to run. Mom carefully asked, "Did she hurt? And is His Highness in order?" Tilly, sitting on her knees, asked if Roxanne could bear her. Roxanne sighed and closed her eyes. She was also a little tired, but there was nothing to do. Therefore she extended her hands to understand what she would carry. But since there were two children, she carried them both the waist and Ryan. And if Tilly smiled pretty and took care of her mother, then the prince was a little embarrassed and surprised by such a manifestation of tenderness. For him, these were such unusual feelings that the boy was about to cry. He turned his head and buried himself in Roxanne's shoulder. And she thought that he was uncomfortable and asked that he could want her to let him go. But Ryan, continuing to hide his face, replied that no. Roxy looked at Tilly and the girl smiled back at her. A maid nun came to meet them. Roxy asked Mia that Loina cried a lot again. But the girl replied that Lady Loina roared much less today because Lady Tilly was with her all the time. The Duchess put the children on the floor and smiling said that exactly. Loina loves her older sister very much. She asked them to be a little here, and she promised to return as soon as she was dressed. As soon as the door closed behind Roxanne, Mia crouched in front of Tilly and strictly said that she should not run with food in her mouth as she had just done. So you can choke because Tilly is still too small. The nanny was upset. She said that first you need to sit down and cheerfully chew. Mia asked if she understood her. The girl promised that it wouldn't be that anymore. Then the nanny turned her attention to Prince Ryan and said that she was pleased to meet him. She introduced herself that her name was Mia Harrison, the nanny Tilly and Loya. But this made an unpleasant impression on Ryan. He seemed scared to death. He instantly hid behind Tilly's back. The girl did not even immediately understand what happened, as well as the nanny. She turned and looked at him. His face was flooded with a paint of embarrassment, and Tilly, for some reason, also felt uneasy. She turned away and angrily thought that she wanted to hug this baby. She remembered that Ryan from the original work grows a ferocious person who is always on the alert, and all this due to the fact that he grew up in conditions when there was no one to trust. But this time, it was different. Tilly told the nanny that the prince had just become one of her 4 warriors. He is the number 1 among the subordinates of the Queen of Demons. The nanny was amused and asked who then 3 more warriors, to which Tilly in all seriousness replied that Mr. Butler and the remaining places are still free. But Mia did not calm down. Tilly's children's spontaneity cheered her in earnest. Therefore, she asked what the girl was going to do when she collects all the warriors. Will capture the world? But Tilly said that why should she do such a troublesome business? It was not clear the nanny why she collects them. The girl explained to her that he did not agree to be her friend, so she said that he would be her warrior. For some reason, Ryan embarked on these words and said that everything was not so. Tilly looked at him, and he quietly said that he had never said that he did not want to be her friend. He said that he doesn't matter which option will be in the end. The girl said that now he was the first subordinate to the Queen of Demons, and asked him so that he would not say now that it doesn't matter. Ryan looked at her bewildered, and she said that it was important to her, like the Queen of Demons. She smiled sweetly while he was standing and silently listened to her, and she thought that she could save him. Then Ryan smiled back at her, and she again thought that, however, this whole story was based on the destruction of the world caused by an evil spirit. If she changes the plot, Saving Ryan now, he will not be able to destroy the evil spirit and the world may die. If it allows the events to develop in accordance with the original plot, Aegis and Loin will save Ryan from the evil spirit after 17 years, and Ryan will then destroy the evil spirit. This will be the path to a happy ending, the girl thought, but for 17 years it is too long. She should just watch how all this time is mocking him. Her thoughts were interrupted by the nanny Mia. She asked if they will introduce her first warrior to Lady Loya, and the girl, forgetting about her experiences, invited the prince, calling him Jan, approach and say hello to her sister. He was surprised that she turned to him like that, but said nothing, only silently went to the crib with a child. Tilly said that Loina was still a baby and she was only 6 months old. Prince Ryan bent over the bed and looked intently at the baby. He did not say anything, did not show delight or admiration, just looked. Tilly looked at him. She was surprised by his silence and low emotionality. She thought that this meeting did not take place in the novel, however. The wheels began to rotate along the destined fate. While the children were in the nursery under the supervision of the nanny, Roxanne, meanwhile, took the bathroom and thought. She remembered how she arrived at the imperial palace and said that she would take Prince Ryan at the Duke's estate. The Emperor and Julian stood in front of her. Pelus said that he understood her care. He was silent for a few seconds. And Roxanne continued saying that His Highness saw the prince with his own eyes. She pressed her hand to her chest. He was the same age as their Tilly. Nevertheless, it was clear how they were neglected. She added that the prince needs to be looked after in a more caring atmosphere than the imperial palace. The emperor looked at Juliana, looking for support in him, but he completely agreed with his wife. She closed her eyes, and with regret thought that they threw the child to starve because they were too busy with negotiations. How would she just hit Matilda in the face? But she looked as if she could die from one blow. The Duchess cursed, thinking about 3 births. Then she turned to the maid and asked her to tell the chief cook so that he consulted with a doctor and changed the diet. Until now, they have not had to worry because Tilly was not picky in food. But they did not know how the prince would react, so she asked to follow carefully. Before her again, the memory of the child's hungry eyes surfaced when Tilly treated him with bread, and she added that the cook prepare a plentiful amount of food so that the boy could eat as much as she wants, without worrying. The servant asked what to do with the remnants of food. The eyes of the Duchess lit with fire. She squinted at the maid and said to be disposed of in the extension. Do not disappear good. Soon a picnic was arranged in the garden of the ducal mansion. The cook tried to fame, and so many all kinds of food and treats were exhibited on the blanket that Ryan did not know what to give preference. Tilly sat near him and watched him absorbed in food. The girl asked him delicious, and he replied that very much. The Duchess was satisfied. Tilly silently watched the prince. The girl noticed that he was eating as if it were his last day, and at first glance, not to say that he was hungry, but it was so cute. She compared him with a hamster. While Ryan ate, Tilly turned to Roxanne and asked why he came to their house. This question made Ryan strain, but the Duchess smiled sweetly and replied that on the road they attacked his carriage, and she thought it would be better if he remained with them and not in the imperial palace. Tilly thought about the word, they attacked. The girl immediately thought about the queen, she knew who was behind it, but she also thought that in order to look after Ryan, she would have to take responsibility for possible accidents. Tilly asked that Dad agreed with such a decision. Roxy assured her that, of course, and she added that he was climbing out of his skin to help. Julian is not as simple as it might seem. He is not one of those who agree that he is not beneficial. But why did he agree this time? Tilly was not aware why everything deviates from the original plot. She returned to Prince Ryan again, thinking that she still could not do anything now. The boy was drinking food for both cheeks and continued to chew. Tilly again asked Roxy that Ryan will also remain in the extension. The response of the Duchess surprised him, because she said that the prince would remain in the main mansion. Tilly laughed and said that it was fine, because she was afraid that she would have to go a long way before the extension. And the Duchess cheered her answer. Then the girl again switched to the prince, and he again filled her mouth with food. Tilly told him that he was enough to eat. She promised him that they would still have dinner when the Duke would return. Ryan incredulously asked that he could have dinner. Tilly sighed heavily. She said that these were just snacks, and if he eats now, then he will not want to eat dinner. Ryan was silent. He regrettably bowed his head as if afraid that it was not true. Tilly smiled and began to wipe his mouth from crumbs. The girl assured him that now he would eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and even snacks with her. and he asked if he agreed. The boy agreed. Roxana said pretty well that Tilly was looking after her friend, and then she said that the Duke came. Everyone looked at him, and he looked at them in surprise and bewildered. But it lasted a second. The next moment, he smiled at the most sweet smile, and Tilly rushed to him. Julian took her in his arms and kissed her on his cheek. He called her his little muse and said that she was as beautiful as always, and Tilly said displeasedly that enough to kiss her. But the Duke replied that he would stop if she kisses him and folded her lips with a tube. Tilly in response kissed his cheek and he laughed joyfully. The Duchess smiled joyfully sitting next to Ryan, and he watched all this cautiously. He was unknown to him such joys. His father never hugged him so much and did not show love and care. He did not have all this. The Duchess turned to him and he looked at her frightened by his thoughts. She said that he would remain in their family for a while, and if something happens, she asked him to inform Tilly. The boy repeated the phrase, "If something happens?" Roxanne smiled, soothing him, and said that yes, anything. He can tell Tilly everything because they will protect her while he is here. Tilly suddenly froze, her eyes widened. She suddenly clearly remembered the phrase written in the novel when Ryan smiled for the first time. Ryan's mood instantly took off, and he smiled, recalling the only year when he felt happiness in his life. The girl hoped that he was happy to stay here, as in the original novel. When they sat at the table in the evening at the table, Tilly exclaimed in full voice that she had a paprika. Julian asked her to chew her food thoroughly. Ryan ate meat. He ate silently until by chance a piece of meat did not fall from his fork. The food fell to the floor and flew off, and he looked embarrassedly where she flew away. Tilly also looked at the fallen piece. Her gaze was surprised. At that very moment, Madame Mathilde strictly made a remark to the prince to follow the manners at the table. Ryan was even more uneasy. He looked into his plate without saying a word. Roxanne and Julian looked at Madame Mathilde condemningly, but she said nothing more. She only covered her mouth with her hand, clearly realizing that she should not talk to His Highness in such a tone. Tilly immediately chopped her piece of meat with a fork, and turning to Ryan said that he could take her piece. The girl said that her servant should eat well, and then she promised that she would invite him to the fortress of the Queen of Demons. Madame Mathilde, hearing this, apologized to Tilly and said that His Highness had a lesson in the morning, giving there to understand that nothing from her venture will come out. Tilly was surprised. And Madame Mathilde said that Ryan had a language lessons in the morning, and 2 more classes during the day. The waist was horrified by the fact that he had such a crazy schedule. He is only 5 years old. But she sighed heavily and said that then she would study with him. And this already made her parents be horrified. The same thought visited them at the same time that their waist will study. The girl persistently repeated that she would study with him. It was alerted by Madame Mathilde and she wanted to object. But Roxanne intervened and asked Madame Mathilde to allow their daughter to take part. This was the first time Tilly generally showed interest in the lessons. Mathilde was silent. Then Roxanne smiled sweetly and said that she would be grateful even if Tilly simply sat next to him. Madame Mathilde continued to be silent, but in a gloomy expression on her face, one could understand that she was not enthusiastic. Julian laid his hand on Roxanne's shoulder and said that why shouldn't they devote more time to Tilly's formation? He said that they will be busy investigating the previous attack on the carriage of His Highness for some time. He paused. And then he continued saying that this could even develop into a problem between the 2 countries. He fell silent again, giving the governess of the prince the time to think about his words with a hidden threat. And then he just offered to do this after when everything was tired. He smiled, but this smile was devoid of sincerity, and Madame Mathilde understood everything. She crossed and replied that as they wish, adding what she thinks, a partner in his studies would not interfere with His Highness to make his formation abroad more fruitful. Tilly stuffed food in her mouth and carefully chewed her, thinking at this time that she would live with wolves, to howl. Tilly looked at Ryan and smiled, and he looked at her in surprise, thinking how to study it together. She thought he was such a cutie, and she asked the question to play school with him. But her mood changed when she picked up a sheet of paper the next day and saw what to do. The teacher turned to her by saying that she could repeat the text only once, since this is her first lesson. But he said to Ryan that he should write 5 copies, as usual. Tilly thought about 5 copies with horror. People should not try to solve all the problems relying on the fact that everything is the will of God. God sometimes gives prophecy or miracles, but usually remains indifferent to human problems. That is why scientists and researchers, studying and studying, should approach problems with an analytical mood. She turned towards the prince and thought that he could read it and understand. The boy painted incomprehensible peasant symbols on the sheet, and she thought that he did not understand anything at all. They force a 5-year-old child to write things that he does not even understand. Is this not a mockery? The girl raised her hand and asked the teacher, "Can she ask a question?" The teacher, smiling, replied that of course, and he added that, unlike His Highness, she really wants to study. Tilly thought dejectedly that how could he say this in the presence of Ryan? Does he not see that his words make her boy be sad and neglect is felt in them? She called him Jan again and sighed heavily. But Ryan nevertheless heard her and looked in a questioning look in her direction. Tilly asked him if he wanted to go to the toilet. The boy replied that no, and the teacher looked at them incomprehensibly. It is not clear what Tilly planned, but she turned to Ryan and, smiling firmly, said that he wanted to the toilet and he did not need to endure. She told him to walk right now. The boy hesitantly agreed, and the waist and teacher looked after him until the door closed behind him. And then Tilly took and tore the sheets on which the text was written. This caused surprise in the teacher. He exclaimed her name. And Tilly, with a serious expression on her face, asked him that whose will it is, God or him. The teacher was perplexing, asked what she was talking about, but she did not save and asked the question that it could be the will of the one who told him that he would force a child who barely knows how to read go through this nonsense. There was indignation in her gaze. She said that this is in order to make Ryan feel weak. He did not expect such a tirade from the child, and he was uneasy. The teacher, restraining his emotions, said that he understands that classes can be difficult for her, and since she just sits here, she does not have to participate. He nervously said that since she was just sitting here, then she does not have to participate. But the girl did not save in front of the adult. She asked that he thinks that she behaves so because she does not want to participate. The teacher crossed his arms over his chest and said that he simply follows the requirements and he was not at all pleased, but he has no choice. The girl looked at him, and in the meantime, he continued to say that it was easy for her to say such things because she did not have to answer to anyone. As for him, he is just a teacher. He did not look at her, but according to his expression, it was clear that his waist hit him. He thought she was just a happy child born in a rich family. The waist asked his name in a menacing voice, and the guy, not expecting this, was immediately frightened by the child and did not understand what she wants from him. But she still said that she asked his name, and she asked not to make her repeat twice. The teacher grabbed his heart and said that his name was Daniel. He wanted to make her a remark about her tone, saying that although he is lower than her in the class, but in his lesson she should... But Tilly interrupted him and did not let him agree. She said that she realized that he has authority in this situation. The girl made a second pause, and then she said that she lets him choose several realistic outcomes of events. In her amethyst color, the threat glowed with her eyes. The first option, he leaves the teacher's post and returns back to the kingdom. The second, she tells Mom and Dad about this situation, and he is punished for an offensive attitude towards power. Tilly asked what he would choose. Daniel, stammered, asked what this means, but Tilly answered him that, as he said earlier, she did not need to answer anyone, and added that this concerns Prince Ryan. She asked that Daniel knows that the insult to royal power is punishable by the death penalty. Daniel's face skewed with fear, and he was repeated the word execution. But Tilly told him that there is also the third option. They can make a deal. Daniel ceases to mock the child and begins to conduct classes suitable for a 5-year-old child. She stared at him, asking him what he would choose. The teacher looked at her in confusion. He could not believe that the child really says all this. Even given that she is the daughter of Prime Minister Remetio, it was already too much. She said that he would not talk about what happened today, especially her parents. This will only complicate it. Daniel only opened his mouth, but from her last statement, the words stuck in his throat. And Tilly, meanwhile, was looking at his gaze, again asked what he decided. The lesson ended, and Tilly and Ryan went along the corridor. Mia was walking towards them. She asked Tilly how classes passed, but the girl replied that she was boring, and now she went to eat and play. The nanny said that then she believes that His Highness would have to be engaged alone. But Tilly turned to the prince and, hugging his neck, said that Jan would play with her. And she added that teachers teach strange things. Mia carefully asked what Tilly had in mind when she was talking about strange things. The girl said that she did not know and said that teachers humiliate Yana. The nanny looked at them silently. The waist thought that Daniel promised now to teach normally, but he is not the only one who teaches Jan, and obviously all teachers make him suffer. Tilly said she would swear with everyone who offends him, but while they are under their roof, they will not be able to achieve their own. Mia smiled at the baby and affectionately promised that she would ask if they may not spend more classes today. The girl raised, asking that this is true, and the nanny assured her that, of course. In return, she asked to tell how teachers offend His Highness. Did they beat him? Ryan felt embarrassed. He hesitantly said that it was not Daniel but another teacher. He hesitated. Talking about this was hard. But still, he blurted out that another teacher pulled him 30 times for the fact that he could not cope with the control. He was quiet and wilted. Tilly, hearing this, clenched her fists and pursed her lips. The nanny Mia, meanwhile, said that she needed to talk to the butler. She asked the children to call the maid if they needed something. The waist said that they would do so. When the nanny moved away from them, Ryan took Tilly's hand. The girl looked at him. He also looked at her, asking that she was angry, but the waist took his hand and, smiling, replied that she was not angry. He still continued to look at her, as if he had not heard her words. Then Tilly suggested that he go to play. The girl said that there is a secret move that leads outside the estate. She asked if he wanted to look at him. After some time, they ended up in the garden. The trees grew around, and on the lawn on which they went out, there was soft grass and flowers bloomed. Tilly scored a whole armful of flowers. Her face glowed with joy. Ryan approached her from behind and asked what she was doing. Tilly said that she would make a wreath. He crouched near her. It was not clear to him what a wreath is and why it is. Then Tilly explained to him that it was a crown of flowers. He asked in surprise that she could do something like that. The girl laughed and said that, of course. She promised to do one for him, and she asked to wait a second. Ryan was surprised, but nodded in consent with his head. Tilly intertwined the stalks of flowers with confident movements. Ryan looked at her, watching and admiring her. He thought, and when she called him out, as if woke up and looked slightly frightened, as if he had been caught behind something bad. The wreath was ready, and Tilly asked him to substitute his head so that she could put him on her. When the manipulations were finished, she admired the result of her work. The girl thought that he was such a cutie. Tilly seemed to think about something. Ryan carefully watched her. And then he bowed his head to one side, and to his surprise, the wreath also moved to the side. The boy was frightened that he would fall, and therefore pulled his head, trying to align his position on his head. It made fun of Tilly. He was so funny. She thought that although he could just put on a wreath again, if he subsides, she would not say about it, because it is so nicer. She promised him that she would make him another time if he did not drop this one. Ryan said that good. And then he asked Tilly whether she loves flowers. The girl replied that she loves. Ryan was wondering why. The waist replied that they were beautiful. But Ryan again asked that she likes beautiful things. Tilly laughed and said that, of course. Then he said that he was, too. Tilly looked at him. Her face became concentrated. And without looking at her, he repeated again that he also liked beautiful things. At that moment, there was a call. A maid went out into the clearing, and she called Tilly. Apparently, they grabbed the estate that there were no children anywhere. It was Mia. She smiled with relief and thought that as she thought, they were here. From afar, she saw them sitting on the grass and flowers. The maid noticed that the boy had a wreath on her head. Mia Harrison is not that she appeared in the original novel. She was a childhood friend of Roxanne and a trusted family serving. After the death of her son and the discord with her husband, she was destined to commit suicide. But when the newly born waist came to her fate has changed forever. Avoiding the deadly fate, she was able to make a small turn to the original plot. Although only 2 people in this world knew about this. She just approached them and, calling Milady and His Highness, said that it was time to dinner. Tilly, smiling sweetly, said that she had a crown for Mia. The maid sat down so that the girl could put him on her head. Mia thanked her for the gift, smiled pretty, and said that now I have to go to eat. The girl replied that she was good and asked how to do with teachers. Mia said that the butler had intervened, so there should no longer be any provisions. She turned to Ryan by calling him His Highness. Ryan was warily asked what. Mia, still smiling, said that from now on, if something happens, please let him talk about this Tilly. Since they're Lady Queen of Demons, then he and she is her trusted assistants. The boy felt uneasy again. A blush appeared on his cheeks, and he only silently nodded his head in agreement. Tilly looked at each other with Mia, and they both smiled sweetly. Then the maid suggested all the same to go back. A month has passed. The children became very friends. They spent all the time together and got along with each other perfectly. On one day, Tilly climbed onto the back to Ryan and ordered him to move forward. The boy Bravo stomped with his burden. She thought that she had passed since he arrived. He raised it because he began to eat better, and his physical forces seemed to become better. And it was good. Roxanne and Julian were beside themselves when they found out that the private tutors of Ryan were mocking him, and the tutor who raised his hands was deported back to the kingdom. The nanny Ryan was still lurking nearby. But she almost did not leave the extension, since the Duke's people took Prince Ryan under their wing and carefully followed her. A friendly atmosphere reigned in the ducal estate. Everyone was friendly and smiling. The maids smiled, inviting the children to try the snacks. In the meantime, Tilly and Ryan conducted a tasting. The girl asked Mia what Loina was doing today. The maid answered her that the same as always. This meant that she ate, slept, and poked. There were definitely pluses to be a baby. Ryan turned to Tilly by naming her by name. The girl immediately turned in his direction. On the fork that she held in her hands was a piece of apple. Ryan wanted to say something, but Tilly stuffed a piece of apple right in his mouth. She thought that it was cute and immediately decided that she probably spoiled him. Mia turned to the girl. She called her my lady. The maid asked that recently she did not see her to wear a rabbit. Mia even filled it with a lot of cotton wool. But the girl unexpectedly stated that the rabbit was fired. This was a surprise, and the maid asked why. The girl grunted and replied that she was no longer sleepy. She used it like a pillow, but now she spends almost the whole day with Jan. She preferred to call the prince that way, and therefore she has no time left for sleep. Mia looked in surprise at Tilly and thought that it seems she really sleeps much less. The doctor said that a long sleep can be caused by psychological factors. Maybe she needed a darling friend. Ryan again looked at Tilly as if waiting for her to put another piece in his mouth. The girl seemed to read his thoughts and said that he also had a fork. Mia watched them. It was very interesting. She turned to Tilly again. She said that her birthday was only 2 days later. The maid asked if she wants any gift. Ryan also looked towards Tilly. Tilly asked that they finished all the preparations. They were looking for tapes a week ago. But Mia still asked Tilly at least a little hint to her. What did she want? The waist extended that well, she thought, and then said that Dad would snow and Mom would read her 10 new books with fairy tales, and she will be quite enough for her. Mia was surprised that she really would have enough, and Tilly looked at Ryan and replied that, as she said, Tilly did not agree, because in front of Ryan there were tears, and the girl thought that, oh no. But Mia interpreted her pause in her own way, and smiling said that Tilly said that there was something else that she would like. The girl replied that was true. She urgently had to come up with a gift that a 5-year-old child could receive in 2 days. Her brain thought intensely, and she eventually said that she would like chocolate cookies. Tilly was delighted with such a simple decision and joyfully repeated that she would like a little chocolate cookies for her birthday. Mia was surprised that this is true. Tilly confidently said that, of course, and she noticed that Ryan had a shine in the eyes of Ryan. Tilly was so excited before her birthday that she had a bad sleep. She was going through every now and then. But when the day of her birth came, she could not open her eyes. She incredibly wanted to sleep. Roxana came to her room and, gently smiling at the child, said that it was time to get up. The girl was silent and was in no hurry to open her eyes. Roxana said that today is her birthday and she needs to prepare properly. The maids also waited for a little lady to comb her and put on a beautiful dress. The waist reluctantly moved and rubbed her eyes. She wanted to say that she was not the typical child who would jump out of bed only because of his birthday. In addition, today she felt sluggish and heavy for some reason. Roxana took the girl in her arms and pressed her to her, saying that he was like that. She continued to persuade her daughter in a gentle voice that it was time to arrange a holiday. Mom and Daddy have a day off today, but Tilly sleepily said that she wanted to sleep. Roxanne promised her that she would cheer up when she was drowned and offered to wash together, and then they would dress her in a sweet dress. After some time, Tilly sat in front of the mirror. She was dressed up in a pink shade dress. The girl still sat with her eyes closed. And while they combed her, she thought why she was feeling so tired. She even lay down yesterday early. 3 genes are physically gifted so that it is unlikely to be sick. Roxanne also dressed for the holiday and came to her daughter's room. The look of the child alarmed her. She asked Tilly that she was not greeted, but the girl replied that she was just sleepy. Roxy smiled again and asked that it was hard for her to fall asleep because of her birthday. Tilly replied that perhaps so. Then my mother told her that she was so excited and also did not get enough sleep. The girl was surprised. Is it really true? Roxana said that Mom and Dad were so delighted that they could not sleep normally. Think only their Tilly has already turned 5 years old. The waist silently looked at her mother, the Till smiled slightly. The maid, meanwhile, brought a red pillow on which the diadem flaunted. Roxy took her and put Tilly's head. It was so unusual. The girl looked at her reflection. She looked bewildered. Roxanne became behind her and smiling prettily said that she was just charm. The waist laughed, asking what is true. Mom assured her that she was the most charming in the whole world, just like her dad. Tilly stopped smiling and said that she would like to be more like Roxanne. Mom said that there was a lot of her, and from her, in the end, her daughter. Tilly became curious, and she asked, "What exactly?" She did not see anything besides her hair. Roxanne laughed and said that their hands were similar. For Tilly, this was a dubious comparison, and Roxy continued to say that her legs too. She restrained the laughter, saying that Tilly's body is closer to her father. She said that everyone would say that Tilly is very similar to her mother when she grows up. Tilly thought that she probably looked like Roxanne when they looked at her from the back and burst out laughing from this thought. They sat by the window and looked at the autumn weather outside the window. Roxy said that very soon the hour would come at which Tilly was born. 5 years ago on this day, Tilly looked fascinated at Roxanne, and she continued to say that she believed that her Tilly was the one that could change fate. This struck the child, and she asked in surprise what my mother means. Roxanne remembered the moment when she was first given her child in her arms. She said that, at the moment when she saw her... Roxanne stopped as if she felt those emotions again, and then continued that she managed to feel that her fate was changing. Well, it's time to meet the guests. They went out into the corridor where the Duke was waiting for them and exclaiming, "Tilly, Daddy," ran to meet him. Julian Remetio held in his arms the younger daughter of Loina. He smiled and said that it seems that God fulfilled her desire as a birthday gift, and so they will have to celebrate it in the room. Tilly asked him in surprise what he was talking about. Then he stepped a little to the side of the window so that she saw that it was snowing outside the window. They opened the window and the whole family admired this natural phenomenon. On the street, snowflakes really circled and lay down on the ground. Tilly put her hands out of the window trying to understand that it was real snow. She could not believe it. Below on the terrace there were priests. These were a man and a woman. He told her that rarely when they have snow in the fall and called her a prophetess. She said that he usually goes in winter. The man thought that a woman, as a person who could see the past and the future, she had to know that it would snow today. But he never heard her say something like that. He turned to her again and said that she looked like today in a good mood. The woman replied that what she was waiting for was finally starting. It seems that God, by the will of a bite, has responded to her prayers. He asked if it was necessary to prepare for the execution of the prophecy, but she replied that this was not a prophecy. Her words were confused. He asked what she meant, but the woman had already moved away and did not answer him. The temple was located on the east coast, on the very edge of the continent. To the west of the temple is the Asur Empire, and next to it, the kingdom of Celus. The woman closed her eyes and said quietly, "Which is interesting, where the duchy is also snowing." If so, she hoped that they also observed this picture, for then they would see that the destined fate had changed a bit. They moved along the columns, and the prophetess said that today it seems to the birthday of the first daughter of the Duke of Remedio. The man confirmed her words and added that a few months ago they also had a second daughter. He thought about whether thoughts of the rite of baptism occurred to her. He had served the prophetess for a long time, but she had never mentioned specifically about her before. At this moment she said that they needed to prepare for the rite of baptism of the second daughter. The servant bowed his head and said that he would prepare everything. The prophetess smiled and quietly said that it would be wonderful. She thought that only 1 year, and she would finally meet her. The one who has silver hair and purple eyes, which she imagined over the past thousands of years. The one who puts the end of her story. The ducal family in full force went down the stairs to the site on which the festive cake flaunted. He was 5, tier, and decorated with her favorite strawberries, and lighted candles were burning at the very top. Tilly was surprised that they prepared a 5th-handed cake for the birthday of a 5-year plan. Until today, there were ordinary cakes. Julian noticed her confusion and asked, "What is? Doesn't she like the cake?" The girl confusedly said that he was very large. Roxanne, smiling, suggested to figure out the cake later. First of all, the birthday girl should greet the guest. Tilly asked in surprise which guest. Then Roxy said that her friend would arrive soon. Tilly asked her mother what she was talking about Aegis. Will he come? She did not notice Ryan, who dropped a gift from her hands when he heard about his friend Tilly. The boy asked in surprise, "Who is the Aegis?" Tilly looked at him, and then she smiled and said that he was her friend. It was evident that she was rejoiced at the upcoming meeting. But Ryan looked at her in confusion. He did not ask anything else. She saw his gift and crouched to take him in, thinking that since Jan was still careful, she should help them make friends. The girl gave a gift to Ryan and smiled, and she thought that even if they were not like brothers, but at least they would become good friends. She explained that Ais is a 5-year-old boy, and now they are all the same age because she also turned 5 years old. It will be much more fun if they play together. Ryan looked away and asked that it is necessary to play together. Tilly leaned over and again looking into his eyes asked that he did not want. After all, you can play more games if there are 3 of them. Ryan said uncertainly, "What's the truth?" Tilly again joyfully said that playing is much more fun if she plays more children. Then he said that he understood. Then he suddenly asked that she would hold his hand so that he was less shy. Tilly closed her eyes and thought that he could be even nicer. Ryan thought that she did not want, and he was a little upset because of this. But Tilly suddenly playfully said, "What else? Of course she will hold his hand." The girl took his hand and her cheeks were covered with a blush. At that moment, the Empress with Ais entered the room. He smiled, walking in front of his mother. The ducal family and Ryan welcomed the Emperor's family with respectful curtsy. Ais greeted Tilly and waved his hand. The girl also greeted, and only Ryan stood silently. Aegis looked at him and said that hello to him, but Ryan continued to be silent. Then Prince Aegis asked Tilly who he was. The girl replied that he was like a younger brother. But Ryan said that this is not true. He is older than Tilly. The children looked in his direction, and Tilly noticed that the older brother would know how to greet someone when meeting. Then Ryan confusedly uttered to Aegisa. Aegis said hello again and introduced himself to his name. Ryan called his back in response, but he was still alert and did not smile. Aegis noticed that Ryan and Tilly held hands, and therefore also took her hand, and looking at Ryan said that he added that he was glad to meet. Tilly was between 2 boys and felt not a friendly atmosphere. Ryan was gloomy, and the Aegis, although he was smiling, it was only external education. The adults, meanwhile, watched the children and were touched by them. The Empress was in a special delight. He threw up his hands and said that it was so cute. It's time to blow out candles. Parents took Tilly in their arms and brought to the cake with candles. They once again congratulated her on her birthday, and other guests also congratulated her on this holiday. Tilly looked at the candles and thought that she was 5 years old, or now she was 33. Julian Remetio reminded her of desire. She must make a desire. The girl thought about it. She closed her eyes, trying to concentrate, and remembered that last year she made up that she wanted to get out of this dream. But in this, she wants everyone to meet a happy ending, as in the original. The girl blew on the candles and they began to go out. Aegis brought her a soft toy in the form of a cat. He said that this was his gift for her. He handed it to Tilly and admitted that he wanted to give her a real cat. But Mother said that a living creature should not be so easy to give. Therefore, a toy instead. He asked her like such a gift? Tilly hugged a kitty and smiling replied that she liked it. She thought that here it was proof of good education. Ryan took a step forward and handed her a box, saying that this was his gift. He seemed completely confused, but hoped that Tilly would also like his gift. She opened the box. There were chocolate cookies. She exclaimed that it was wow. And then I took out one and tried it. The boys stood on both sides of her and watched her eat. Ryan asked her delicious cookies, and she joyfully replied that she was delicious and said that he should also try. But Ryan shook his head embarrassedly, giving to understand that he will not be. At that moment, Tilly asked what he did not want and immediately said that Ais could eat and stuffed the second prince in his mouth. Ryan looked angrily at Aegis. He, too, did not really chew the cookies very joyfully, and only Tilly smiled and said that when you eat together much tastier, right? But the boys were silent. Tilly again asked Ryan that he was sure that he did not want to try. She threatened that otherwise she would divide everything between her and the Aegis. Then Ryan leaned over and took the cookies from her hands, began to eat him silently. Adults who were next to children fell silent observing this scene. They expressed concern about Tilly's behavior. Children sat on a sofa opposite adults. The boys ate cookies, and Tilly smiled, thought that how sweetly her crumbs were eaten. The boys frowned at each other. Ryan seemed more gloomy. It was evident that he had hostility towards Aegis. And although he smiled outwardly, but also did not have particularly warm feelings, just his upbringing did not allow him to openly express hostility. The Empress interrupted Tilly's thoughts, saying that they also prepared a gift for her. The girl carefully looked at Aegis's mother. She smiled and held a beautiful box in her hands. The girl thought that by the word we, the Empress, meant the imperial family. She opened the casket and Tilly's eyes widened. She looked at the gift and could not believe. Is this a crown for a daughter from another family? This meant that they accepted as a bracket. But why? She thought that they had already recalled the proposal of engagement with us. Tilly was sitting in all eyes at the jewelry. The boys also examined the gift. Tilly thought that it was not like it was the idea of Charlotta herself. It should be a plan of Peleus himself. Tilly suddenly thought about Aegis, introducing him to adults. She also wanted to ask if he was ready to go to it and mentally called him an old man. She became funny. She smiled and said thanks, although she herself thought that she would still look at whom. The street still continued to snow, therefore the children decided to go out for a walk. They rolled snow lumps in large balls. Ryan had a snowball more than Aegis. Tilly watched them, and then she looked at adults, who also went out into the street by capturing warm blankets. She noted that both Julian and Roxanne cheerfully smiled at the Empress. The girl thought that they know for sure the meaning of the tiara that the Empress brought. She thought that they did not react in any way, because it was too early to discuss it too early. Or is she reacting too sharply? The girl sighed, and at that moment the boys attracted her attention. They wanted her to appreciate their efforts and praise. It was evident that they were satisfied. Tilly asked that they sculpt a snowman, and she praised that they succeed great. The boys picked up her idea. Aegis said that another ball would go, and Ryan immediately said that he was too. Tilly asked why. After all, these two balls could be connected. But Aegis stubbornly said that he did not want. This surprised Ryan, and Tilly asked why. Then Aegis said that Ryan Sharn was too dirty. This offended Ryan, and he also said that he did not want to say that Aegis had too small a ball. Tilly only thought that these boys... But Tilly still wanted to reconcile them, and she asked the butler to put one ball on another. He did something with pleasure. She joyfully said that now he was her, and they told them to go to do another if they disagree. The boys silently looked at each other. And then they turned and went to roll new snowballs. Tilly looked after them and thought why they could not get along. They were the best friends in the novel. She was not aware like she was a nanny for two naughty nephews on a family gathering, one headache. But they again distracted her from thoughts calling to look at their work. The waist looked in their direction and saw that they rolled up new balls and put them on each other. She perked up from the fact that they did it together and said that she looked great. Tilly cheerful and stroked Ryan on the head. The girl said that now, since they built a snowman together, they should become good friends. The boys measured each other. They did not say a word. And the next moment they grabbed Tilly by the hand, each of their side. Ryan smiled as if he felt an advantage. And the Aegis was serious. Tilly was surprised by their behavior. She thought that it was necessary to make a desire for these two to get along. Ryan looked evil and pulled Tilly's hand in his direction. But Aegis did not let her go, and turning away from Ryan, his head pulled Tilly to him. Then Ryan came up and pushed Aegis. The boy apparently did not expect an open confrontation and therefore could not answer. From the fact that Ryan pushed him, he simply fell into the snow. Tilly screamed at Ryan, sharply pulling him. Prince Ryan turned away from her and closed in himself. He was silent without responding to her remark. And Tilly was frightened that she should not have done it. Until recently, Ryan did not dare to raise his heads. It was not necessary to scream at him. Tilly immediately apologized for screaming at him, but he only squinted at her. Aegis got to his feet and shook himself off, and Tilly continued gently saying that Jan should not push friends like that. It seemed to Ryan that it suddenly became very cold on the street, and even on trees and earth lay white snow. There was blackness in his soul again. He bowed his head and asked him to forgive. He was sorry that it happened. Tilly watched him went to adults and asked for his hands to the Duchess. Adults with the whole company decided to return to the estate of Ryan. Ayaz went to Tilly and asked how she... Tilly asked how about him, is he okay? Aegis replied that he was normal, but that boy... He looked after the adults who left Ryan. He asked what Tilly would therefore want him to make friends with him. Tilly was so sorry that she shouted at Yana. She just thought that it would be great, but she turned to Ice and said what she had already told him. Let him think about what he wants to do, and not about what he should. Then the boy said that he would go and make peace with him. Tilly wrapped his arms around his face and asked him why. Did he like something in Ryan? Aegis admitted that in fact, until that moment he did not like him. But now he saw why Ryan behaved like that. He said that they could become good friends. Tilly asked that he understood why he was doing this way. Aegis replied that yes, he disliked Ryan. It seemed to him that he was trying to take her from Aegis, but she is not an object for which they should fight. He smiled and said that Tilly would definitely abandon them if this suddenly happens. Tilly smiled at him and said that he was so sweet, but he does not need to be so sweet with everyone. Otherwise, he will be accepted for a simpleton. The boy asked what kind of simple finished. The girl said that this is such a kind person that she already gives everyone everything that he has. Aegis asked that then she advises him not to be sweet. She replied not quite. Perhaps at his age it is difficult to understand this. Firstly, to be simple up and be cute, not interconnected concepts. Tilly looked at him and said that he could be cute as much as he wanted, and she will stop him if he overdrates. Aegis admitted to her that she, Tilly, is the only one with whom he was a simpleton. He loves her more than anyone in the world, not counting her parents. But Tilly nevertheless asked him not to be simple up, even if he loves someone stronger than her. Aegis asked her not to worry because this would not happen. Tilly looked at him in surprise, and he smiling said that he needed to clarify everything with Jan and return him. After all, they can blind the snowman together, 3 of them. She agreed that it was possible to blind alone and together. She remained standing on the street, watching Aegis climb the steps and went to the estate. Tilly thought that getting rid of a couple of teachers was not enough. People will be good at Jan all year while he is here, but everything will return to what was returning to the kingdom. She looked into the sky and made a silent request so that someone please tell her what to do. When Aegis entered the room, he immediately saw Roxanne with Ryan in his arms. He buried himself in her shoulder and she comforted him. When Ryan turned to them and looked at him, tears sparkled before his eyes. Aias was waiting for him to calm down and approaches him. And really Ryan quickly wiped tears, and standing out of the knees of the Duchess, headed for Prince Aegis. He came up and the first asked for forgiveness. He regretted that he pushed him. Aegis smiled peacefully and said that everything was in order. He took Ryan's hand and asked what he likes, Tilly. It was unexpected, but Ryan still replied that he liked it. Then Aegis said that he also likes her. Ryan said he knew. But Aegis said that his love for Tilly, she differs from him, she is different. Aias loves her in a special way. Ryan was surprised how it is in a special way. Lady Roxanne and the maid sitting behind the children were surprised more and more. And the Aegis said that when you love someone in a special way, you will marry her like a duke and countess, like his parents. Ryan replied that it was understandable. And the Aegis added that let his love for Tilly differ, but Ryan loves her too, and she is him. Ryan asked in surprise that she said so. Aegis squeezed his palm and confirmed that Tilly also loves him, so Ryan will not lose her only because the Aegis is here. But instead, Tilly can begin to hate them if they quarrel. This was truly scared by Ryan. Aegis said that like Tilly, he also likes Ryan. He added that, to be honest, Aegis liked him at once at the meeting, but he was unfriendly because he decided that Ryan also loves Tilly in a special way. Aegis promised that he would no longer behave like that and asked how to become real friends. To become friends? Ryan never had friends, but he knew what it was, and so he agreed. Aegis was glad. He smiled, and Ryan thought that he could also become friends with Ace. For some time he watched his new friend, and then asked that Tilly also loves Aegis in a special way. Aegis honestly replied that he was not yet, but he is trying very hard for Tilly to answer his feelings. He asked that Jan could help him like his friend. Ryan replied that yes. Aias said that then we had to go and apologize to Tilly that they left her alone, and then you can blind the snowman together. The children left, and Roxanne and Mia sat surprised that the children so adult resolved the conflict. Roxanne asked me that it was now. The maid smiled and replied that in her opinion, the children made peace. Roxanne said that Prince Aegis is really something with something. The maid supported her and added that it would not be easy to cope with him when he grows up. Roxy asked what she meant Tilly, but Mia answered not. Any girl whom the prince will eventually fall in love. The children met on the street again. The boys walked holding hands. They waved Tilly with his hand and smiled. The girl was happy in response that everything was working and they could play the 3 of them. And the maid Mia doubted that this first love at 5 years would last long. When the night came and Tilly lay down on the bed between the parents of Roxanne asked her, did she have fun? The girl answered pretty much more. Roxy turned to her and said that now, when she was 5 years old, she should go to bed in time. Now it's too late. But Tilly asked why, because the difference is only one day. Parents laughed her question. They hugged her on both sides and said that they were grateful to her for being born to their daughter. And she fell asleep, thanked them for the fact that they were her parents. It seemed to her that her body, for some reason, is so heavy. Did she really have a heat? She hoped that this was not a cold. She thought that everything would be in order with her after a good sleep. It is always so from the moment she was baptized. Suddenly she heard a voice that clearly said that everything would not be in order with her. Tilly sat on the bed. There was a man in the room. A black cloak was thrown on it. She looked at his face, and he said that there was no need to worry like that. In the end, this is just a dream. They would not have met. Do not use it with her strength. Tilly threw the blanket and got out of bed. She asked why and who is he? And then I realized that it was Ryan. Tilly was surprised. It was Ryan who grew up and matured as if from the future. But the man walked around the room and answered not all her questions. And then he added that the child is so hotly beloved by her sleeps in his bed. Tilly asked who was he. The young man sat on the bed and said that she could not worry, he could not do anything now. As he already said, this is just a dream. He smiled and asked that today is the 5th day of her birth, and then he smiled and congratulated her on his birthday. Tilly said uncertainly that congratulations continue even in a dream, but still thanked. And he said that he came to tell her something as a gift. The baby asked what was it. The guy said that she would be very painful when she wakes up. The girl asked scared why. He strictly replied that it was because she used her divine forces before the body groaned to them. She made snow in the fall. It was amazing. She asked him that she made her snow with her strength. Then he continued saying that as she knew, the baptism of children from 3 families, this is something like an awakening that allows them to use their divine power. Divine forces that they call special abilities. Thanks to them, she becomes healthier than ordinary people. Tilly said that this was so, but the girl was silent, and she thought that she couldn't be that this power was awakened in her. In addition, there is no such special ability to control the weather. He said that although she was baptized, she knows the price that she would have to pay for using divine power in the human body. Tilly said that she would have to pay with vital forces. He replied that was true, and the more powerful, the faster it consumes the years that remain in it. So he advised her not to guess unjustified desires, at least until he matures. Tilly desperately said that this was not her sincere desire. The man closed his eyes and said that it should be. God gave her strength, because it was necessary. Tilly angrily asked, "What then? What is he?" But the guy only grinned and said that he was not going to answer. In the morning, Tilly woke up with temperature. She had a throat and tormented a cough. She felt broken. The maid Mia sat next to her all the time, and when the girl woke up in the morning, she first asked if she wanted water. Tilly noticed the alarm in the eyes of the nanny, but could barely cry the word nanny. Mia said that the doctor said that this was just a cold, so Milady would recover after a good sleep. Tilly thought about her parents. Surely Roxy and Julie worry about her, especially because she had never been sick before. Having made an effort, the waist was able to sit in bed, and the nanny handed her a glass of water. The girl asked where the rest is now. Mia answered her that the Duke and the Duchess are now in the palace, and Prince Ryan was waiting for the door. Tilly was surprised that he was sitting behind the door. Mia explained to her that she asked him not to go inside so that he would not pick up a cold, but he was still sitting there. Tilly took her head even to think it was hard. She asked Mia to tell him that he could go and play with all her toys. The maid said good. She said that Tilly needed to sleep at least a little. The waist was so bad she had almost no strength and her head was very ill. Therefore, she lay down on the pillow and closed her eyes. She remembered her dream. Again, the guy who dreamed her last night. His words about baptism as a symbol of awakening, allowing to use his divine power. Tilly thought that she was not invented by baptism. It was hard to think, and she decided that, okay, she knew nothing. Meanwhile, Julian was in the imperial palace. The day was already in the evening. The emperor entered his office by knocking on the door so that his friend and partner was distracted a little. Julian sat at the table with littered piles of papers. Pelias asked how long he still plans to sit locked up. Instead of an answer, Julian asked the emperor did he remember who was the youngest awakened. Pelias replied that it was Julian's ancestor. Then, the Duke recalled that it was definitely the 8th Duke of Remetio. He woke up at 10 and died at 20, 2 years. He also said that it is obvious that he died at such an early age due to the fact that he used his strength too often. Pelus was taken aback when he realized what Julian was driving towards. He asked that his friend wants to say that his daughter's illness is associated with awakening. Did he find something? Julian, looking at the excited emperor, said that he did not know how Celus has a family there, but the family of Remetio and Acer, only those who had these special abilities were sick. The emperor confusedly said that the waste was only 5 years old. He thought that if special forces wake up in the generation of their children, this meant that the return of the evil spirit was coming. The gaze of the emperor became concentrated. He could not believe it, but everything said about it. He turned around and, leaving Julian's office, categorically said that nothing was known for sure. The Duke was silent. Pelus asked him to return to the estate and spend time with her, instead of locking himself up here. Julian looked into the back of the departing emperor, and he said that he would send the letter to the Prophicals. Surely they know something. But he again turned to a friend and persistently said that he had finished his work. It was time to return home. Julian leaned his face on his palm. It was hard for him. He hurried home. Tilly exclaimed joyfully when she saw him sitting on the edge of her bed. Julian said that yes, he returned early today. She smiled back at him. And he worried about what was so painful for her? Usually she scolds him when he comes early from work. But the girl said that she was normal. He incredulously asked that this was true. She admitted that it used to hurt earlier, but now she was in order. Mia told the Duke that she had recently eaten and took medicine. Tilly called him, and he immediately switched his attention to his daughter. There was still anxiety in his eyes. Julie asked what she wants. Tilly lay leaning on the pillow. Her eyes were closed. She fell asleep. And in a barely audible voice, she asked him to buy her liver quite a bit. She still asked, "He knows what she likes?" He used to bring her cookies with whole boxes when she asked. He sat and silently thought that she was asking for cookies. What would it mean? Her face flushed. The temperature did not retreat, and she again asked him to bring her 2 tastes again. Mom always took both of them. She fell silent, and he thought that she had dozed off. But Tilly said after a few seconds that the matter was not even in quantity. The main thing is that he brings both tastes. Mia said that there should be the medicine. Before him, everything was fine with her. Julian replied that he apparently had to go to the sweet store in order to catch her awakening. Mia asked his lordship to take the prince with him. This request surprised the Duke. Then the servant explained that he was waiting under the door in the morning, and now he and Lady Loina. She added that he was sure he was bored and a walk would benefit him. The Duke of Remetio took the boy with him. They left the carriage and went to walk to the nearest shop with sweets. But when they went into the confectionery, the boy simply ran away from the number of sweets that he saw. Julian Remetio smiled, delighted that he still took Ryan with him. Ryan stood and looked at the window, choosing what to buy, and the Duke thought that when Tilly said brought, she meant Ryan. He brought her birthday cookies. Julian Remetio called the boy, calling him Jan. What made the prince be somewhat surprised? So far, only Tilly called him that. He turned and looked at the Duke, and he crouched, to be on the same level with the boy, and said in a whisper that in public they should look like a father and his son. Then the boy asked what Tilly wants to eat. The Duke was good, natured. He replied with a smile that she asked him to buy what she loves. Then Ryan seriously said that Tilly is omnivorous, and this caused a new smile of her father. The boy decided to take everything a little. He turned to the counter and asked the seller to put different cakes. The Duke of Remetio watched him and sadly realized that he was only a child. But the queen still sent so many people to follow him. Everything will be in order with him while he is here. But in the end, he still will have to return to the kingdom, and this caused concern. The boy concentratedly watched the seller's actions, and the Duke looked at him, thought that he could adopt him and leave him with them. He sighed and was shocked by the thought that he was only to think that he was ready to consider even such an option. When Tilly woke up, she was impressed with so many sweets that she was brought. She sat in bed, and in front of her was laid out everything that the Duke and Ryan brought. Tilly was surprised to ask why there are so many cakes here. Did she ask them to buy all this? Mia smiled and replied that this happened after dinner, when Tilly took the medicine. The girl still did not remember this moment. She only asked that she didn't sleep all this time. The maid told her that the medicine probably had a great effect on her. Tilly bite off the cookie said that exactly, and then she thought that she was still not good. She clearly remembered the messenger from her sleep, his harsh look and the word that she used her divine powers before the body had grown to them. She made snow in the fall. She still could not believe that the divine forces fulfilled her desire. But then again, the voice of that messenger reminded her that she would not have any more unjustified desires, at least until she matures. She also remembered the words that God gave her strength, because it was necessary. Tilly analyzed his words again and again. She was given strength due to necessity. She was born the older sister of the heroine, so she had to be baptized for the sake of awakening forces. She should save someone, therefore they gave her strength. When she made up to appear someone and told her what to do, it happened. It was a desire. Tilly decided that it was bad. What she sincerely wanted did not come true. A few more days passed, and she was healthy. She was allowed to get up and leave the room. Therefore, she was elegant and cheerful, rushed along the corridor. She ran to meet her friends on the go, shouting their names and offering them to play. The girl looked great, and because when the boys noticed her, she happily shouted her name. They sat on the floor and painted something, but then threw this lesson and turned to it. The children missed their friend and therefore were sincerely happy to see her and began to take turns hugging her girl. Tilly asked what they were doing here. The boys asked her to wait. And then they brought the drawing that they together painted for her. It depicted a snowman and satisfied children. Ryan said that she would rather recover, they draw something to her. They wanted to bring as soon as they finish. The girl said that she was already better thanks to them. Ryan asked that she no longer hurt. Anxiety was read in their eyes. The girl laughed and assured them that, of course, this is just a cold, and now she is completely recovered. But the boys stood with sad faces and were silent. She asked them what it is. Are they not happy? They can now play together. Aegis said that it was good, and immediately asked that Tilly was going to get sick again. The girl replied that everyone sometimes caught a cold. Perhaps in the future, she would pick up a cold again. Ryan uncertainly said that they had not caught a cold before. Tilly said that this is so, but after baptism, there are no guarantees that you will not get sick anymore. Aya said that they say that you only get sick when special forces awaken. So they heard conversations about her awakening? Tilly asked who talked about it. The boys said that the servants in the imperial palace. She thought that the reason why members of the three families were sick after baptism was not an awakening. This happens if you overdo it with special forces, exhausting the body. Tilly, unexpectedly, conspiratorially said that she would tell them secret that all due to the fact that she made a desire. The boys asked what she made. Then Tilly said that she asked everyone to be happy. She looked at them, but sadness in their eyes did not disappear, and they unanimously said that they would not be happy if she got sick. The girl looked at them and was silent. Nevertheless, she could not tell them any more yet. But now she still said that one day everyone would be happy. The guys asked with distrust that everything is, and she confirmed that all, because this is the happy ending. Tilly thought that soon she should make another desire. She didn't really like it, but she should meet with him and find out what she is still unknown. After some time, at the estate of the Duke of Roxen, Tilly and Ryan said goodbye to the Duke of Remetio, and he himself held in his arms the youngest daughter, Loina, and talked about the fact that he needed to leave for a short while, and asked that she would not cry if he missed a lot. He handed over his daughter to his wife and smiled sweetly at the same time. The baby clearly exclaimed the ba. And Roxana smiled too. Then he crouched in front of the waist, and Ryan said that this trip is really very important, and he asked her to encourage him with a kiss. But Tilly stubbornly replied that no. Ryan stood behind her and watched them. Then the Duke looked at him and asked the bewildered boy, what could he then? Ryan came up and kissed Julian Remedio on the cheek. The Duke laughed merrily. The waist looked at them puzzled. Capeta was already waiting for him and everything was ready for departure. The Duke still turned to his daughter and asked that she would kiss him when he would return. But the girl stubbornly snorted and said that she did not want to. But the Duke, with a winch out, said that he was sure she would change his mind when he finds out what he was busy on this trip. She woke up from the fact that she fell asleep. The sensations were strange. She wiped her saliva and thought when she only managed to fall asleep. Near the window he stood again, the harbinger. He said that apparently her head was clogged with stupid thoughts. He told her not to make desires. And he asked that she wants to die so much? Tilly closed her eyes and said in displeasure that she had not made anything yet. And he sternly looked at her and said that she was going. Tilly took a few steps to him and asked what he wants from her. I spoke to her a bunch of everything that she does not understand and disappeared. The guy sighed heavily and said that he did not know much more than her. All he can do is just to wait. He came to her that time only because she, as it turned out, could use the divine force. And he again repeated the bewildered waste that if she was frivolously using her strength in a fragile body. He was silent. But almost immediately he continued saying that he would just die in one day, and then strictly demanded that she promise him that she would not use the forces to at least 15 years old. Her life is not dear to her? The girl was sadly bowing her head, thinking that in fact was not really. But then she raised her face and asked what was he waiting for. He replied that fate. Tilly silently looked at him, trying to understand. He continued saying that she appeared, the one who was not her part. He asked that she would allow her to ask her the same question that she asked him then. He looked at her, and she expecting him to ask, and he asked who she was. Who is she, capable of using divine power but not constrained by fate? He knelt before her and asked him to answer him. He stroked Tilly's palm over his face, and she covered her eyes and hugging his hand said that she herself did not know. All she knew, this is that she should save someone, but she had no idea who exactly. The guy said that if she does not know who should be saved, so the choice of who needs to be saved remains with her. Tilly asked in surprise what she could choose. The girl said that in this case she wants to give up the full and not to change fate. The guy asked that even if it means that Ryan would betray those to whom he believed, and in the end he will meet death, Tilly objected that he should not die. The guy said that this is the same, does she understand? The evil spirit will master it, and he will endanger the world. But in the end what? Will he be saved? Is it really so good? He smiled at her and removed his hand. Tilly bowed her head and said that she was sorry. She was silent, and he asked why she apologizes. The girl replied that it was she who created an evil spirit and condemned this world to destruction.